So much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with something that I know is really important to you, something you talk a lot about that I don't think people hear enough on podcasts like this, which is that extraordinary results require extraordinary efforts. Talk about why that's so important, what you think people need to hear.
I mean, this is a term, that phrasing I actually attribute to a friend of mine, Dan Gill, who's the chief product officer at Carvana, which as a company also doesn't get enough credit for how much of a tech company it actually is. Super interesting. And I think as a general framework for me, not just, and a lot of what I say with you today is not really specific to product in any way. We should actually talk about that. It's like the product function is an instantiation of like the general concept of management. Like being a chief product officer is not that different from being a chief whatever officer. You have to apply the same frameworks and concepts to get people to achieve goals together. But one thing that is like absolutely universal that I think we forget it in Silicon Valley, or a lot of people don't sort of internalize it, is that if you want to accomplish something truly extraordinary, if you want to be in the 99th percentile in terms of outcomes, it's going to be really difficult. Like it's going to be really uncomfortable. And you got to sort of remind people of that if they ever find themselves in the comfort zone at work, they are definitely making a mistake. Like they have definitely screwed up somehow. It's not that an extraordinary effort is sufficient to an extraordinary outcome, but it is 100% true that it is necessary. And so I do use that framework as a sort of guiding principle in my own leadership.
To make this even more real for people, what are examples of moments that were extraordinarily hard?
It is not about any sort of grand single story. I think the story is actually told through 1,000 little things. And so for me, the story is told through 1,000 Jira tickets, not through 1,000 grand events. The extraordinary effort thing is an reminder that like it's supposed to be really freaking exhausting. It's supposed to be. So like on Friday night, when you get hit with an escalation, on Friday night, when you get sort of, hit with a bunch of new bugs from someone in the engineering team that you've got to triage, those are the moments where great players and great teams are separated from good players and good teams. And it's so easy to say this at a company like Rippling because we're winning. Like as a company, for all of our foibles, and we should spend time today talking about where things are not perfect and not great, but the growth rate of the company on the revenue foundation that we have is extraordinary, like really, really compelling. And it gives you as a leader the air cover to get up in front of your team and say, hey guys, I need the last ounce of oil that you've got left. And if your company's not growing very quickly, if things aren't that great, if your growth rate is 30% or 40%, it doesn't feel as good as a contributor in that business to like lean in and give everything you've got on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, because you don't know that it's going to yield much. And so extraordinary results, outcomes demand extraordinary efforts. But if there's no chance at an extraordinary outcome, it's very hard to get the extraordinary effort. And so I like to remind people at Rippling, at least, that like it's so rare to have the opportunity to be able to be a part of a team where the extraordinary effort that you do put in on Friday or whenever it is actually contributing to an extraordinary result. It's a very special and rare thing, and it gives me a superpower as a leader because I can lean on that when I'm wringing the oil out of somebody who's in the bored and tired zone.
I saw the same thing actually at Airbnb with Rachitsky. It always felt like things were going great and like maybe we could take a break after something we shipped was killing it. And it always felt like the opposite. It always felt like, how do we press the gas pedal further? How do we go faster? How do we go bigger? There's never like a moment to take a break.
I spent 7 years at Apple and learned under Steve Jobs, when he was the CEO, learned what we called the death march, which is what we did to the engineers. It was like, as soon as you shipped one version of the iPhone, like you were just immediately thrown into the pit of building the next one. And there was no break. It was just relentless. And talk about an extraordinary outcome at the end of the day. There is no relief. It just like in a competitive market, and if the market is valuable, it's competitive, no question. If you leave anything on the field, if you sort of leave a crack for your competitor, like 100% chance they're going to go fill that crack. And so You have to be relentless. There can be no relaxation of the organization. It doesn't mean people can't come and go or people can't take vacations or sort of live their lives, of course. I mean, you can't, it's not like people are human beings. You can't grind the individuals down, but the team as a collective group of people has to be sort of on the ball all the time. There can't be a break. And if you leave one, you're just begging for the slightly more hungry competitor to come in and eat your lunch. And, you know, that's the beauty of capitalism.
Also, very counterintuitively, and maybe like the more optimistic perspective here is when you do give your team space to just twiddle their thumbs, bad things start to happen. Morale actually dips in my experience. People get distracted. They're like, oh, what are we even doing? It's not interesting. I find that keeping people busy and motivated and fired up, even though you may think they'll be happier taking a like many week break and slowing things down, I find they get morale actually goes down in those moments.
Here's a management framework that I use fairly often. As an executive, you don't know how to get any decision exactly right. It's not knowable. You don't know how much budget to allocate. You don't know how many people to put on a project. You don't know how to set a deadline for when you're going to ship something. But of course, you have to set some default. So you make your best guess, and then you manage to that best guess, and you learn as you go. Because in software development and in business in general, everything's emergent. These are not things that are knowable top down or a priori. And so you take a best guess. And knowing that you're not going to get the right answer, you need to decide whether oversteering or understeering relative to your perceived midpoint is better. And so let's talk about staffing. Like when you staff a project, is it better to overstaff or is it better to understaff? Knowing that you can't get it right. Well, it's better to understaff. If you overstaff, you get everything you just said. You get politics, you get people working, I think most importantly, on things that are further down the priority list than necessary. You have like 20 things on a stack rank list and like, you know that you got to do the top 5, but the next 15 down, it's kind of ambiguous, but you've overstaffed the project. So like the next 10 things down are getting worked on before you even know if they're necessary. That is poison. It's wasteful. It slows you down. It creates cruft. And so it's very clear that understaffing is less evil than overstaffing. In this particular framework, the advice is understaff deliberately, always. And then the wisdom element is to know not to understaff and sort of knowing the difference between those two things. And so that's the way we work at Rippling. Everyone is constantly asking for more resources. And of course, where we can afford to and where it's appropriate, new resources arrive. But it is really important to me that we feel that we've deliberately understaffed every project at the company.
There's a previous guest, I forget who this was. They use this metaphor if they want their team to be dehydrated, to always be wanting more water. And then eventually they're too dehydrated and okay, we need someone to help.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's a line along the lines of extraordinary efforts I want to make sure I read because I think this is really good. This may be a way to summarize what you're saying, that good teams get tired and that's when great teams kick the good teams' asses.
Yes, this was a quote actually from Sunil, and he found it from a women's basketball team coach. And it is to my point earlier about like you got to run the engine in the red line at all times, because the minute you let your guard down, the minute you slow down, the minute you relax, the minute you leave a crack for your competition, the great teams are going to come in and kick the good team's ass. And it's like, sports, I'm not a very sporty guy, but sports analogies are sort of irresistible because at the end of the day, business is a game. None of this matters. We're not going to carry it to the grave. It's like you're here to do this stuff because it somehow fulfills you while you're on the planet. And I love the sport of business, and I find that sports, notwithstanding the fact that I watch very little of it, is that and military. Those are sort of very ripe sources of parallel concepts to apply in leadership.
I find also those most intense, stressful, long nights are the moments you remember most and remember most fondly back to when you're building something. The key, though, is that it has to go well, as you said. If you are succeeding and winning, all of this is romantic in the end and nostalgic. Remember that time we built this thing and worked late nights and shipped this thing? If it doesn't go anywhere, you don't feel that. So I think that's a really important component of this is you need to be winning and succeeding.
I mean, one thing that I've learned from Parker is Parker's our CEO at Rippling. He said you don't really learn from your mistakes; you learn from your successes. And it's like you do, of course. And he would admit you learn a bit from mistakes, but I do think that this is sort of feel good bullshit that, it's like, well, you didn't succeed, but, at least you learned something. I've had failures. Like when I look back at the 9 years I spent working on Inkling from day one in 2009 until we sold that business to a private equity firm in 2018, up the curve of Silicon Valley coolness, back down the other side into obscurity. Like, of course, I learned and grew a ton during that time. But in now what I think is 6 or 7 years, I'm trying to do the math, 7 years coming up on at Rippling, I've learned so much more because I've seen success. Like I've seen rapid, wild, crazy, off the charts success of the business. And it's more informative. Like there's more to glean from seeing how it's done right than there is to glean from seeing how it's done wrong. If I tell you you're going to get on an airplane and one maintenance technician has seen it done right 100 times and the other maintenance technician has seen it done wrong 100 times, but he learned from his mistakes, like it still hasn't had any success himself. I mean, give me a break. There's not even a comparison which plane you're going to feel more comfortable on. And so I do think that like learning from your mistakes thing is a bit of a feel good trope that actually has very little substance in reality. It's why, as an early career product manager, or it's why, like, frankly, at any stage of your career when you want to learn, you should join a winning team. Like it's cool to go and start a company at 22. Good luck to you. The odds are not in your favor, but the folks who, when I look at a resume and I see that someone's joined, they were at like really good companies when those companies were super exciting and in crazy growth mode. I'm like, I instantly want to interview that candidate because I want to hear what they learned from being part of a winning team. And that's sort of one of my go-to heuristics when I'm looking at candidate profiles. And I think it's an undertold trope. Like not an undertold trope. It's a piece of advice that I don't think people embrace enough in the Valley, that like success begets success and you should chase success.
Speaking of success and learning, you've been a longtime COO at Rippling, and the reason you're here, recently you moved into CPO, Chief Product Officer at Rippling, which is very exciting and very rare. I don't see a lot of COOs moving into product. Let me ask you why did you move into that role? I feel like you've been killing it at COO. Maybe that's the reason. Be careful what you're good at. And also just what are some surprises about this, about moving into product? Because a lot of people imagine what it's like and then you're actually doing it.
The story at Rippling is pretty interesting. And I'll tell it because I think it explains why I'm making this transition, but this isn't really about me. I think it's sort of a pattern that your listeners would find useful. In general, your best executives are the ones that you can mostly toss into any challenge and they will bring order to chaos. They will fix the thing. And I do appreciate the terms that people have used at Rippling for me, talking about McGinnis's injured birds, where at any given moment, some function is in disarray or in jeopardy, and I go and focus very carefully on that function to get it back in order, batting 800 maybe, like not always wild success, but I did that everywhere except R&D. I would think about helping out with components of the sales organization, like our channel team, or I spent time, building out the recruiting function a few times when it needed to be sort of rethought in response to our growth. But it never R&D. And so I would have my feet up on the table, looking out across the floor at this dumpster fire off in the distance, just sort of emitting smoke and wondering if someone was going to go in and deal with that. And the smoke takes various forms, and when you're growing as quickly as Rippling is growing, it's not always something that necessarily even impacts customers, but it's the sort of thing where you're like, fuck, that architecture's not right, or this, they're not measuring adoption correctly. From the outside, I actually had quite a few criticisms that I could lob in. And what happened at Rippling was we made some hiring mistakes. I think the folks that we had in those roles would agree that they weren't the right people. We had a hiring mistake in engineering leadership where the product leader at the time had to sort of run engineering. We subsequently had a mistake in product hiring, and a lot of us had to sort of pitch in. And Parker and I sort of stared at each other through 2 years of this kind of disarray or this chaos or this agony of things, and just never really having good executive leadership over both engineering and product at the same time. And I remember Parker sort of slumped down in his seat and said, "Oh fuck, I have to run another search." And I said, "No, like the gig's up, I'm going to go do it." And he really sprung up in his seat. He's like, really? Like, you'll go do that? I'm like, dude, this is what the business needs. And so that's what I did. And that really started about a year ago I realized I was going to do it and expressed that to Parker in December. I really took it on in January of 25. And so it's been 11 months of learning. Jumping into the product role when the product function itself, although staffed with really talented people, wildly understaffed, and without a single spiritual leader on top of it to drive consistency and process excellence, had become locally optimized but globally incoherent. And if you know Conway's Law, you are destined to ship your org chart. And so with a locally optimized, globally incoherent team, you had a locally optimized, globally incoherent product experience that needed to be resolved. And so my efforts over the last 11 months have been to establish, like greater clarity in terms of how we do things around here, better process, better, general leadership, hiring and firing. I mean, just doing the sort of cleanup on aisle 3 that needed to be done, even though a lot of the people in the team were quite talented and doing an excellent job of managing their specific domains. Jumping into the product role has been like quite eye-opening. I feel a little bashful about the naivety of my view from the outside a year ago. Product teams have a hierarchy of needs, and we like to sort of point at the failures to meet elements of that hierarchy higher up the triangle, and sort of impugn the failure of that organization for not, as an example, measuring adoption metrics very carefully and not closely tracking those metrics as a means by which to drive execution. When I jumped in, I was like, man, we need to establish some basic standards for test coverage. We need to establish some basic standards for how we do what I call a factory inspection on a product once it's ready to roll off the assembly line. Do we have a checklist for what we call product quality? And what does product quality mean? Those basic things weren't there. And so the idea that we should be spending time measuring adoption metrics is absolute insanity. You're skipping a lot of steps between here and there. And so we have made great strides, and I think it's translating to product quality improvements for our customers. But I feel, as I said, a little dumb for the way I was thinking about it before I jumped into the deep end. There is just no excuse as an executive for sitting outside of the mess and thinking you know the answers. It's a cardinal sin as an executive to do that. You need to go and see. You need to be in the boiler room. You need to study the system bottom up and develop hypotheses for how to amend the system. And that's what I've been doing.
I love hearing this because so many people have teams that are not functioning incredibly well. And hearing from someone that is not a longtime product person come in and try to fix these problems, I think is really useful and interesting for people to hear. To dig into this a little bit more, was the big lesson and kind of eye-opening moment that there's a lot of kind of foundational work that needs to happen to achieve this outcome that you're trying to achieve, which is measure engagement and adoption well? Is it like tracking and metrics and data science? Is that kind of the lesson there?
The lesson is that everything must be done in its time and order. And you can move really, really quickly. There's no sort of excuse not to move with urgency on all of these things, but you got to do them in order. And you have to lead bottom up. Like, you got to lead from the specific circumstances you observe. And I think for me, one of the best things that's happened over the last 11 months is that I've gained a greater trust in my own instincts, that the sort of patterns I've matched across other functions do indeed apply in product. But I have both the advantage and disadvantage of not having led a product function before, and therefore must think about every problem from first principles. I have no choice. I can read shit on the internet. I can listen to clear thinkers on topics and import their ideas, but I'm very reluctant to import an idea without breaking it down into its constituent parts and figuring out how it applies at Rippling. And so I don't actually give a shit about adoption metrics as a matter of principle. I care about adoption metrics when I care about adoption metrics. Like, I realize that that's a tautological statement, but it's like, I'll get there. And so in certain parts of our product, I really do care about adoption metrics. I care a lot about adoption metrics in our applicant tracking system, our recruiting product, because it's in a really good place from a usability standpoint. It's very well instrumented. It's got like very happy users. It's got an awesome growth profile. And so we should be really focused on the adoption metrics, because I think that's going to be an important ingredient to low churn over time. Removing friction from the implementation process, as an example. There are other parts of our product where I would say I don't care at all about adoption and am much more focused on foundational things, like I said earlier, test coverage or whatever, just to make sure that the thing is stable and good and delivering exactly what it's supposed to deliver once it's adopted.
Now that you're on the inside of the product team, what's something that you think people outside of product, say Matt 2 years ago, or other, I don't know, go-to-market leads, other execs need to understand about product that they don't until they're on the inside?
I'll give you another framework that I like to use. In the financial world, there's this concept of alpha. Alpha is outperformance relative to the index. So that's why you have seekingalpha.com as a very popular website. What they mean by that is you're looking to buy something, some combination of assets that will outperform, let's say, the S&P 500, if that's your benchmark. So alpha is the outperformance relative to the index. And then you have the concept of beta. Beta is just volatility. Beta is not good. A high beta stock jerks around for no particular reason. It's like discorrelated with the index. It just, it's very high beta. Great if you're an options trader, but other than that, it's not really something you want in an asset. And so your ideal stock is a very high alpha, very low beta stock. They don't really come in that shape because alpha and beta tend to be correlated, but that's what you want when you buy a financial asset. So what's the analogy? I think you have high alpha people who are very valuable. I think you also have low beta people who are also very valuable people. Dennis Rodman, basketball player, nut job, very high alpha. And there's room on every team for one Dennis Rodman is a favorite of mine. It's like you can have one difficult employee who's got a ton of upside. And so this alpha beta thing, I use it pretty often when contemplating what kind of person I want and also what kind of process I want. So when you're building a product from 0 to 1, you're probably pursuing alpha. You're looking for some angle on this market or this customer problem where the product is actually going to provide an outsized return relative to whatever the default solution is. When you have a more mature product, or if you have somebody in the product operations group or whatever, you probably want a more low beta environment where it's like it cranks it out, it does it very reliably. Our payroll product, we badly want the payroll product to be very low beta. We really don't want the payroll product to have any unpredictability or aberration. And so we're willing to accept more process. And here's a fundamental principle of design in an organization, which is that processes in a business exist for the sole purpose of lowering beta. Processes are for decreasing volatility in the output of the system. The downside of a process is that it suppresses alpha. And you have to be super, super careful and judicious in the application of process in the product team to know that you're lowering beta in the places where you want to do that without suppressing alpha in the places where you need it. And so as we've gone through the last year of reforming the way that we build product at Rippling, it's been a game of recognizing those places where I need to implement a touch of process, just a touch. Other places where I need to implement a very clear, rigid process where I don't want alpha, I just want low beta. And so examples of this are, let's say, our product quality list, which we lovingly at Rippling call the pickle.
Why pickle?
Yeah, so it's actually a really important thing. I think if you want to bring about cultural change in a team, like look, we have 1,300 people in our R&D organization. It's a big ship that we have to steer. If you want to create a moment that sticks in people's brains and sort of becomes a zeitgeist or something that they latch onto, you got to create an entity, a vessel for meaning, and then you got to fill that vessel with your meaning.
A meme, you might say.
Yeah, well, sure. A meme, like a meme is actually a good example of this in common culture. In pop culture, I think like It's why when people come to the table with ideas from the outside, I welcome those outside ideas. But if the first thing I ask the person to do is to tell me what they mean without using those words. So when someone comes in and says, hey, I want to do this thing on strategy, I'm like, cool, tell me what you mean without using the word strategy. And it forces them to break it down into its constituent parts. And if they can articulate it clearly without using that word, I know that they know what they're talking about. And if they just fumble around with the word strategy again, I'm like, okay, you actually haven't thought this through. And so with the pickle, with the product quality list, it's like I could come up with some generic term for this, but I really want a new joiner at the company to understand that this is an idiosyncratic thing to Rippling. This is unique to us. You want to understand this thing. I also want it to become a component of common parlance in the day-to-day work of the product management and engineering teams. And so pickle, as cheeky or silly as it sounds, was deliberately sort of angular or stood out as a vessel I could fill with a particular meaning. And so we have a product quality list. And the product quality list is lightweight in the sense that it just articulates in the simplest ways the standards we want you to meet when you ship a product. It doesn't apply to every product, not every line applies to every product, but it's comprehensive and it provides me with a framework for iterating over time as we learn. And so just yesterday, we shipped a product to Parker. This is part of our process. When we ship a new product, it goes to Parker, who is the big admin for Rippling at Rippling. If you're not aware, Parker is the sole payroll administrator for Rippling for all 5,200 employees. He personally runs payroll always. There is no exception for all 5,200 people. He does complain about it sometimes, but it's a remarkable achievement for the software and perhaps for him. And so he also installs any new app that we're going to install for ourselves because we dog food the hell out of everything we build. Yesterday, he goes to install this new application. We're about to ship a new app for feedback, allowing people to give one another feedback in their companies. And he installs it and he goes in and it dumps him onto an empty screen. And he's like, what the fuck is this? Like, what is this? What's going on? Like, hey, wow, talk about fail. So I chop another one of my fingers off. I'm down to 9. And I'm like, well, what did we miss? What we missed was there was a fucking feature flag. And I'm not allowed to say feature flag without fucking in front of it because like feature flags are the bane of my existence and the worst things in the world. They constantly cause problems. Engineers put one in temporarily and forget it. It's like shims. If you're building a house and the general contractor puts little shims in places and then forgets that they put the shims there and then builds a wall over them and eventually the shim fails and all of a sudden your door doesn't fit. Like feature flags are super dangerous and need to be managed carefully. So fucking feature flags. Anyway, we had one. Parker installs it. They forgot to disable the feature flag. He gets a blank screen when he installs the application. What did I do? My reaction was, ugh. Go back to the team, give them direct feedback, tell them not to make that mistake again. But also ask the question, how do we miss this in the factory inspection process? And the answer is, we didn't have any line item in the pickle for feature flags. And so I added a line to the fucking pickle that said, you are allowed to have one feature flag that governs your entire product at ship. It's an extreme standard that might not be achievable, but it's the standard we aspire to. This framework, the pickle, given these lightweight checklists, iterated on consistently in response to everything we learn as we go, constitutes a very nice lightweight way to lower the beta of the system with hopefully only a modicum of negative impact on the alpha for how we build product. And so that's, you asked me a very simple question. I gave you a very long-winded answer, but these frameworks help me design systems that scale, across 1 going to 2,000 technical workers.
Wow. Okay. By the way, pickle, is that like an acronym or it's just like, I like this word, we're going to call it pickle?
Product quality list.
Product. Okay. I see. So it's the consonant. Okay. That's
PQL, which how could you pronounce it other than pickle?
I'm imagining all your decks have little pickle emojis and
the pickle emoji thing, the dancing pickle in Slack. There's a lot of, it lends itself to a bit of fun.
What I think about is Pickle Rick.
Yeah.
Do you get that reference?
This is a Rorschach test.
Okay. So this high alpha, low beta, I love this concept. So the idea is depending on the team, depending on the problem, we need a high alpha, low beta person, or actually we're okay with a lot of variance for this specific project.
That's we're willing to accept a bunch of volatility in this area in exchange for the upside we get from the creativity and risk taking of these people or or the lack of process that sort of gives them the latitude to do what they want to do.
And so when you're hiring, you're looking for, okay, is this person low beta or not? That's going to be the
For
question.
sure. I mean, it's really quite a useful way. When you meet a candidate and my modus operandi, and I think, we'll talk about hiring for a second. I think I've spent a lot of time with teams at Rippling talking about how I hire. And it is born of batting practice. It'd be super interesting to actually be able to rewind the tape on my life and sort of contemplate how many candidates I've met in every context. Many thousands, maybe tens of thousands. I don't know. It's a lot of batting practice and a lot of model training in my brain. And so I rely a lot on my intuition, which of course HR people say you're not supposed to do. That's complete bullshit. If you have a good intuition, you should absolutely rely on your intuition. And what you have to do after you have a reaction to a candidate when you're looking at hiring somebody is you need to decode your intuition so that it can be expressed to other people productively. And so one of the frameworks that I use for this is SPOTAC. It's a very ugly acronym. There's a hat tip to somebody out there in the universe who originally thought of this. It's not me, but I adopted it. And it's that people are smart, passionate, optimistic, tenacious, adaptable, and kind. Those 5 things. 6. Can't even count. I told you I lost a finger right when I made a mistake, so I was down 1.
9 to go.
SPOTAC isn't by itself a good top-down framework, but when you're thinking about, why did this candidate why did it not click? Why did I not like them? You go down the list, you're like, oh yeah, no, this person, it's that they were not excited about the idea. They weren't passionate. It's that they talked shit about their previous manager and that they were a victim of the performance of their last 2 companies. That's what it was. They're not optimistic. It's the framework is super useful to evaluating people, and I think the alpha beta framework is also super useful when you come away from a conversation. You're like, I like that guy. I think he'd be really, really good. Why is it that I don't think he would do a good job on this product in particular? And the answer is like, this is a high alpha product area, and he's a low beta person. Valuable, but definitely not the right fit for this. And so I think it's really useful in that context as well.
I love all these frameworks. You're speaking to this audience. Frameworks.
Yeah.
So high alpha, low beta, sometimes high beta is okay. SPOTAC. In hiring, is there anything else that you find really useful before we move on to a different topic?
When I first started working in the product organization, I was introduced to an interview framework or an interview tactic that I hadn't really used much at all, I think, in my career, which is that every product person at every seniority level is given the same case study. And the case study is extraordinarily difficult. It requires you to think about many, many dimensions simultaneously, to think about data propagation issues. It's quite technical. And the rubric that we use to sort of evaluate performance of that case study is it gives you guidance on what, for us, like an entry-level PM looks like, what a junior, mid-career, senior executive PM might look like. And everybody comes away from that interview feeling like poop, like they had failed it. Whereas on our side of it, we're like, wow, that person got really far. Like they saw around 3 or 4 corners in a really impressive way. There was 10 they didn't see around, but they saw around 4 of the hardest ones. And they were not defensive when we gave them new information that called into question the validity of their solution. And they were willing to interrupt us to ask more questions and like a lot of the sort of basic human interaction models. You never think that like giving someone an impossible task and even including the L5 person versus the VP on the same thing would be productive. And let's just say our recruiting team still sort of kvetches a bit about this and feels like we eliminate people too aggressively at this stage of the interview process. But I've found the wisdom in it and think it's actually quite useful to give everyone the same simple, complicated prompt and just hand them a drill bit, give them the concrete wall, and see if they can get a millimeter or an inch into the concrete. They're never going to get all the way through the wall. It doesn't matter. You're going to learn a lot. And I've found that to be kind of an eye-opening new thing for me that has been fun. I mean, look, the joy of product and the joy of product management and the joy of being part of product, I think there's a bunch of joys, actually, if I could give you a sort of running list. But like one of the big joys is that you get to work with some of the smartest people in software. Engineers are very smart. They're not always the best sort of social, entities. salespeople are awesome social entities. They're not always the best systems thinkers. You go down the list, but the magic of product management is that you kind of have to, we talk about the mini CEO. I think it's kind of a stupid misnomer, but there's some wisdom there. And I think the wisdom is that you have to be a polymath. Like you've got to be really good at working with other people. You got to be good at communications and articulation. You got to be good at project management. You got to be good at the science and the math and the engineering. It's really fucking cool. And so I think one of the great joys of this job for me has been interacting with like the tippity top of the smartest and most polymathic people in the industry. I'll say one other thing about what I love about leading product, which is as a COO, my job was to accept the product as it was and optimize everything around that. My job was to make sure that the product operations, in our business, the interface to the insurance carriers, the interface to the payment entities, the government regulators, that stuff all just sort of worked. It was to make sure that our sales engine, our marketing engine, all the go-to-market stuff, like optimized itself around what the product was. It was about recruiting and making sure we got people in to work on the product. You kind of go down any function that isn't in R&D, and I had some hand in trying to figure out how to make that function work to the best of its ability, given what the product was. And now that I lead product, I'm like, oh, wow, this is the high order bit. Not that I didn't sort of understand that, but like now I really get that product is the high order bit. If you get the product right, it fits in the market, everything else gets easier. Finance is easier, sales is easier, marketing is easier, recruiting is easier, everything gets fucking easier. And so I think the other joy of leading the product function is that I get to set the highest order bit in the business's success to 1.
This is really great to hear. A lot of times people outside product don't understand these sorts of things and look down on product a lot of times, especially, sales folks, CEOs, a lot of times. I love that you're seeing this and realizing this and recognizing just how important and interesting and challenging this work is and just how awesome PMs are. As you know, a lot of people are very anti-product manager. Why do we need product managers? We don't need them. Just slow everything down, all this process.
Yeah. I have a distinction there, which is I'm anti-shitty product managers.
That's exactly how I put it. If you hate product managers, you just haven't worked with a great product
manager.
Well, it's
like, look, I love wine. Wine's one of my things. And I've learned a lot about wine. And one of my favorite lines, like, I don't like Chardonnay. And I'm like, no. Chardonnays are the most fucking amazing varieties of wine in the world. You just haven't had good Chardonnay, and there's a Chardonnay out there for you. Product management, it's like, you don't like product management, you think product managers suck. It's like, well, you just haven't had a good Chardonnay yet.
That's exactly
once you have one, you can't unlearn it.
You're like, let's find that PM ASAP.
Okay. No, let's find that Chardonnay ASAP.
That PM with some Chardonnay. You touched on this product market fit point, and I want to double down on this thread. You've had a couple really interesting experiences of struggling to find product market fit with your own startup. You said you worked on it for 9 years, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then with Rippling, complete opposite, extreme product market fit up and to the right. What's something you've learned about just that you think people maybe don't understand about what it feels like, what it takes to get to product market fit, how things change?
There's a line that this venture capitalist, whose name I will not mention, said, which was, that product market fit is a sort of thing where you absolutely know it when you see it. And therefore, if you don't absolutely know it, you don't have it. And this kind of gets back to my point about learning from mistakes versus successes. It's like, over and over again, over the course of the many years that I spent at Inkling, we thought we had it. We thought we had product market fit, maybe, and in hindsight, with the benefit of now having experienced solid product market fit, it was so obvious that we didn't. And like, I've invested in like 60 companies or 70 companies. I don't know. It's not something I actively do. But opportunities by virtue, I think, of my role at Rippling sort of show up, and I talk to lots of entrepreneurs, and I love it. And I find it super stimulating, and I love the fresh ideas. And it's just something I do as a real cherry on top of the sport that I play already. But when I get the investor updates for the guys who've been at it for like 3-4, years, and I read the updates from them, that I sent to my investors in 2011 and 2012, I'm kind of heartbroken. We talk in Silicon Valley about never quit, but that is complete, absolute venture capital bullshit. The incentive of a venture capitalist is to put money into your company and milk you dry. They never get their money back. There is no way for them to take that investment back. And so the only logical desire that they would have is for you to keep trying against all odds, because there is the occasional example where someone pivoted from A to X and it was wildly different and it worked. Slack was originally some sort of a gaming company and became corporate chat. You know, Airbnb maybe. It's like there's some examples of companies having made wild pivots and succeeded, but man, is that rare. I mean, just so exceedingly rare. And I think it's important to remember, like, you know, I'm 45 years old. We're going to be on the planet. I mean, the average age of a man in the United States when he dies is something in the mid 70s. Like I got 20, 30, maybe if I'm lucky, 40 years left on the planet. Very conscious of the time that I have. And like, I don't regret what I did at Inkling. I learned a lot. It informed what I do now. I don't think the chapter I'm in right now could have come without the chapters before it. And so it's a beautiful, wonderful thing that I did what I did. But when I read the investor update and I'm like, you're where I was and you are not getting out of this. The Silicon Valley try until you die mindset is not pro-entrepreneur. It's pro-venture capitalist. And I know why that is, but I think it's important to say out loud that you should fucking quit. You should reset the clock. You should reset the cap table, because trust me, product market fit when it arrives is insane and it's exciting and you should pursue it and never delude yourself into believing you have it when you don't. It is dangerous and regrettable. How's that for a speech?
Beautiful. The anti VC speech. I
got more where that came from. By the way, it's not anti VC. It's anti
VC propaganda.
It's the incentive. Everybody's acting in accordance with their incentives in Silicon Valley. The executives, the founders, the venture cap, everybody's of course behaving in accordance with their incentives. And the venture capitalists have very strong, enduring incentives that have shaped the dynamic of how Silicon Valley works. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just really, really important to point them out and scream at them for the 25-year-old entrepreneur who has no fucking clue how this stuff works. Trust me, the 45-year-old entrepreneur or the 50-year-old venture capitalist who have been in the game for a while, they get it. They've observed it. They know what it's like. The system is there to take advantage of the people who don't, or at least it is the easiest prey for the incentive structures. Not for venture capitalists as individual people who are beautiful and wonderful. All of them are just really wonderful people. It's just that the incentive structures lead to some real harm, I think, in certain cases.
And the thing I find is when you do quit, VCs, like I'm always just like, hey, let me know when you're starting your next thing. I'm excited to invest. They're rarely, unless they're not a great VC, rarely are they just pissed at you for like, how could you possibly not make this work?
That's the thing. Like as a founder, when it's time to throw in the towel on your business and you're so obsessed with giving money back to the cap table, I always remind the entrepreneur, like, hey, if you're in the seed investing game, your forecast is zero. Your assumption on every investment is that it's going to go to zero. Any seed investor who doesn't take that stance is off their rocker anyway. They're a very bad investor. Seek investors who play the long game, who want to be in your second and third company and are willing to take a bet on the first one and let it go to zero so that you can get on with stuff. I mean, this is like, I've had that conversation many times.
This episode is brought to you by GoFundMe Giving Funds, the zero-fee donor-advised fund. I want to tell you about a new DAF product that GoFundMe just launched that makes year-end giving easy. GoFundMe Giving Funds is the DAF, or Donor Advised Fund, supported by the world's #1 giving platform and trusted by over 200 million people. It's basically your own mini foundation, without the lawyers or admin costs. You contribute money or appreciated assets, like stocks, get the tax deduction right away, potentially reduce capital gains, and then decide later where you want to donate. There are zero admin or asset fees, and you can lock in your deductions now and decide where to give later, which is perfect for year-end giving. Join the GoFundMe community of over 200 million people and start saving money on your tax bill, all while helping the causes that you care about most. Start your giving fund today at gofundme.com/Lenny. If you transfer your existing DAF over, they'll even cover the DAF pay fees. That's gofundme.com/Lenny to get started. This begs the question of just when is it time to quit? You know, if people hearing this might be like, oh man, like what are some signs that, okay, it's time to wrap it up?
Here, look, history provides us with a clear guide. When you look at companies having hit it big, they hit big pretty quick. It's very, very dangerous to be late to the party. It's very, very dangerous to be early to the party. And the vast majority of the time, that's the problem. You know, like Rippling, had it been started in 2014, would not be what it is today. I think Rippling, had it been started today, would not be what it is 5 years from now today. And so I think like timing is a lot and it's very hard to control for. But when you get the timing right and the market is real and the product works, product market fit, like I said earlier, it's super clear. And so if I were to pick a number out of a hat just from my lived experience, I think it's very important. One aside, don't ask people for advice. Ask people for relevant experience. If you ask them for advice, they will always give it. But if you ask them for relevant experience, they rarely have any to offer. And if they don't have any to offer, then don't ask for their advice. So ask people for relevant experience. And I try to do this, you know, with my own entrepreneurs when I work with them. It's like, let me offer you whatever relevant experience I have. And my relevant experience on this topic of when to quit is like, I think we could have called it after the second or third pivot, which was somewhere around year 4. It is of course very important to believe in what you're building and to be to be persistent. But there is definitely no shame in saying, look, we've pivoted once or twice. It's not catching. I got to go do the next thing. And I think like if you're year 4, year 5 in your entrepreneurship journey, and it's not just obviously a screaming, rip-roaring growth story, it's extraordinarily difficult. This is so extremely rare. So beyond even already the rare scores you're gonna, face from the outset, that now is gonna convert to something crazy. So that's hard to hear, I guess, but man, it can be really liberating when you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna do this. I have the energy. I'm gonna do it again. I'm just gonna do it with a clean sheet.
That is really helpful. You have this really fun way of describing product market fit around receptors and drugs.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think this is like a really fundamentally misunderstood dynamic. When founders message me and they're like, "Hey, like my LinkedIn post and my tweet for this launch," I do it. I retweet it. I like it. Whatever. Nobody follows me on Twitter anyways. Doesn't matter. But like, I do that, and then, but I think to myself like, this is not what this is about. Like, this is not how great companies are built. It can be a nucleating event, but it's not a major thing because nobody cares about your company. Like, your launch doesn't matter. Big fat pull the slingshot back launches amount to the teeniest thimble of water in the ocean of noise about startups and companies. And so you just got to build it brick by brick, bottom up, and these launches don't really amount to much. And so how do you think about that? Like, how do you think about the insignificance of your launch, or you think about all the effort you're putting into building a product that you believe is going to have product market fit? Well, if you recognize that the market is immutable, no amount of tweeting, LinkedIn posting, advertising is going to change whether the market wants your product. It might raise awareness about your product, but it's not going to change whether somebody wants it. Then you take a different mindset. You have to view your startup as running an experiment in the universe to see what you get in return for that. And this analogy of like drug discovery and binding receptors is like, nobody at Genentech thinks they can market their way to better performance inside your body. The binding receptors for that drug, they exist or they don't. And when they build their product, their goal is to find out whether the binding receptors exist. But fate already has decided the outcome. This is absolutely true of every software product you build. Fate has already decided the outcome. The market's either going to latch onto your product and run with it or it's not. Do not ship the product, find a lack of success, and then try to market your way through that, because the binding receptors likely don't exist. And for me, it was a very liberating mindset, because now I just have to find the right drug and I can forget trying to convince the body to develop the binding receptors for whatever it is that I'm building.
What I love about your advice here is you were an early investor in Notion. which is one of the classic stories of it took them, I think it was 4 years to get to something. They moved to Japan, they worked on the whole thing. And so is there a lesson from there? Like, is that a rare example where it actually worked? And that's not an example to be inspired by because it's extremely, extremely rare.
Let's talk about alpha beta again.
Okay.
As an investor, you might build a checklist of things you want to make sure are true or false about a company and hope that that's going to yield the kind of like investment success you're looking for. Does it have this kind of founder? Does it have, is it a C Corp in Delaware? Like, boom, 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 boom. And these checklists are all about what? They're all about suppressing beta. They're about avoiding avoidable mistakes. They're about bringing stability. Jeff Lewis is an investor who has many angular views on things. And I think one of his most enduring phrases is narrative violations. This idea that like the common wisdom must be violated in some way by every company that has an outsized success. It is absolutely true. And when I give these general observations on the patterns in Silicon Valley, the most successful businesses inevitably violate something on that list in some really important way. And so Notion, you can't replicate Notion's success as an entrepreneur. You can't replicate it because you're not Ivan. You can't replicate it because you're not Notion. You can't replicate it because it's not 2010 when they started the company. Do the math on that. Or 2011, actually. These guys stuck with it. They went through hell. They pivoted. They went to Japan and sat in kimonos and meditated on what they were going to build. And by hook / crook, they got to where they are today as a really wildly successful business in an extraordinarily difficult market where building businesses is virtually impossible in productivity. It is dominated by Google and Microsoft. Carving out your own niche in that market is just unthinkable. And so I look at Notion as having succeeded by virtue of the narrative violation of persistence. I don't think is a good idea for very many people that happen to work for them. And I look at it as being a function of the founding team and their specific idiosyncrasies, the absolute insistence on craftsmanship from Ivan. It's just him. That's his thing. The takeaway lesson is not give up or don't give up. The takeaway lesson is certainly not go do what Notion did. The takeaway lesson is that every company succeeds on the foundations of the idiosyncrasies of the founder. The idiosyncrasies of the founder. Rippling succeeds for almost the polar opposite reasons that Notion succeeds, but in both cases, the companies succeed on the idiosyncrasies of the founder. And so embracing that, recognizing those idiosyncrasies, that's what great investors do. They spot that element of spikiness and greatness in a candidate investment, and they convert that to a commitment. And then, of course, the investor, the good ones, accept what they get in exchange from that from the universe.
I love that we went in this direction. I wasn't planning to talk about your investing career. Just to give people a reason to listen to this and maybe rewind, and I want to ask another question around investing. What are some other companies you invested in early?
First of all, okay, so I sort of hate the question. Like, what are some other companies you've invested in? It's a fair question, but the problem is like I'm going to give you a bunch of companies I've invested in that won, that are like really notable. So what I would like to do instead of answering that question is I'm going to let me give you some bait. Like I was one of the first investors in Notion. I was perhaps the first. I don't know. Ask Ivan. Clever, which had a great exit. I was one of the first investors in Zenefits, if you've heard of it.
Heard of it.
I was, before I joined, one of the first investors in Rippling, and then more recently, like invested in. Here's a funny one. I was one of the first investors in Deal, if you've heard of them. I was able to exit. I was able to exit that position, and then hopefully that company's going to zero with their criminal behavior. But whatever. But more recently, like if you know. Like Decagon, which is doing some really cool stuff on the AI front.
Killing it.
I'm in LangChain, like great. So those are some companies that maybe you've heard of, but like, how about like, I invested in Macro. The founder was Derek Lee. Macro's out of business. I invested in Debrief, Ned Roxon. It's it's out of business. I invested in Verb Data with David Hertz, out of business. I'm reading from a list. I invested in, what's the number? 70 companies according to this list where I track things, and like most of them went to zero. And all those founders were awesome. All those founders were kick-ass, and all those founders put a shit ton of energy into building their businesses, and they went to zero. And they're enduring relationships. I can call on any of those people, I think, maybe with the exception of Deal, and call in a favor, and I've got a few subsequent, and actually a lot of them joined Rippling, believe it or not. So I don't know. Companies I've invested in is a long list, and I love to give you names of companies that don't exist anymore because it's self-serving and a horrible survivorship bias to just list the good ones.
I love that answer. I think you're being modest in the context of your hit rate is clearly very high. Even one or two incredibly successful companies out of 70 is a win in VC. And so you're doing very well. But I think that's a really important perspective. When you see people's logos on their websites of all the companies they've invested in, you have no idea how many at bats they've had.
I think it's good practice to ask people to give you the full list.
Yeah. What are your favorite failures that you've invested in?
Oh,
yeah. No, I'm not actually. Okay.
Well, I was like, we don't spend time on it, but I think it's actually a really good question. But yeah, like what are some of your your best failed investments?
Show me the logos of the companies that didn't work out.
It's a really juicy question. Yeah.
There's a topic around this area that I wanted to spend time on, and I haven't heard anyone think of things this way, which is this idea you talk about of compounding plus power law plus entropy, and how that's a really useful frame to think about business.
So you kick this conversation off sort of invoking the extraordinary outcomes demand extraordinary efforts line. Hat tip to Dan Gill. And these are part and parcel. Like, man, understanding the nature of the universe is a pretty good way to work within it. And so like power law distributions happen everywhere. It explains why so few people control so much wealth. It explains why Steph Curry is just so vastly better than the next guy down on the list on the basketball team. It explains why populations are concentrated into a relatively small number of mega cities in the world. It's like power law distribution just plays out everywhere. And like once you see it, you can't unsee it. It sort of plays out in many dynamics. People tend to think that like the world plays on a more linear relationship where the X and Y axis are sort of, Y equals X, but that is absolutely not the case. And the implications are profound. It's like if you build something to 80 or 90%, the Y axis is barely budged yet. You haven't like hit the inflection point in terms of reward. And so the implication of the power law more broadly is that people who are in the top 10%, the top 5%, don't just get 10 or 20% more reward. They get 10x the reward or 100x the reward. It's really dramatic. Entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, is a very simple concept. It's the reason your sock drawer becomes messy. It's the reason that potholes form. It's the reason we have to put so much energy into maintaining the aircraft we fly to keep them safe because they really, really, really want to fall apart. And that's the nature of things. If you abandon a city for a few months, it starts to go fallow, And so entropy is just this concept that shit tends toward disorder. And the universe, life itself is a temporary victory against entropy. You and I should not exist. The sun gives energy to the planet. It organizes stuff that we can eat. And like we fight entropy until we lose the battle somewhere, as I said earlier, at the age of 70 or 80. If we're lucky. What does this have to do with product? This is really about effort. The only antidote to entropy, the only antidote to decay in a system is energy. You got to inject energy. So if you have a code base, every line of code that you add to that code base increases the entropy of that system and demands ever more energy from human beings to go in and tend to it to make sure it doesn't break. And if you want to achieve greatness, if you want an extraordinary outcome, and in particular, if you want to be in the top 10%, top 5% on the x-axis so that the y-axis is through the roof, then you have to relentlessly inject energy at every single step of the game. Teams will, sadly, but because we are all human, teams will always optimize for local comfort over company outcomes. Not because they get together and think we should do that, although unions do that unequivocally, deliberately. But even in a collection of product managers or engineers, what's going to happen over time is entropy is going to creep in and people are going to optimize for local comfort. Your job as an executive, as a leader, is to fight that entropy tooth and nail every single day. It means that every time you see a bug, not most of the time, every time you go and you drop it at the feet of the product manager or the engineering manager, every time, in public, preferably. It means that every time someone comes to you to hire someone and says that they have skipped the back channel, every time you're like, you can't hire this person unless you do the back channel. It means that when you get into the bored and tired zone on any process, that you as the executive have got to demand the 99th percentile of energy, because otherwise entropy creeps in and the system decays. You have to do this. One of the messages that I delivered recently at our like our top 75 manager offsite that we do roughly every 18 months, was a reminder that like, if the purest form of ambition and the purest and most intense source of energy in the business is the founder CEO, that every next concentric circle of management beyond the founder CEO has the potential to be an order of magnitude drop off in intensity. And that is fucking dangerous, because if you go to 2 layers and it's 2 orders of magnitude drop off in signal and intensity, that is a very dysfunctional organization. So what I said to the team was, it's not that you need to buffer people from the intensity of the CEO. It's that you need to absolutely mirror that intensity. There are plenty of constituents in the business around you who will advocate for relaxing. There is an infinite supply of people under you who will buffer other team members from the intensity of the demands. Your job is not to be one of those buffers. Your job is to preserve that intensity at its highest possible level and let the buffering happen somewhere else. And that's the point, is that entropy creeps into the system insidiously and slowly over time off your radar, and you have to maintain that intensity every minute of every day to try and fight it if you want to stay at the extreme right end of the power law that obviously governs the outcome of everything that we build.
What does that look like to pass along that intensity? Like, what does that feel like? What does that look like? So say Parker comes to you, this bug sucks. I got this a broken screen. You cut you cut off your finger. Maybe that's the example. Okay, still got him. Okay.
I got all 10.
Okay, great.
I'll give you concrete examples. Actually, the joke that I sort of played on this one when I presented to the team was that the next sort of slide in my presentation was with the sound effect, the Slack huddle thing. And Parker's icon in Slack is just, he uses the generic yellow.
The egg?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which, it's like, it's funny. And
Yeah.
so everybody knows the yellow egg is Parker. And so the next slide in the presentation was boop, 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 which is the sound that Slack makes when someone calls you. And it was Parker Conrad is inviting you to a huddle. And then the next slide was Parker Conrad is modeling personal intensity. And the idea is like, if you know, like if you've ever been dragged into I want to talk about this fucking problem right now, and whatever you're doing, unless it's an interview, like I want you to come and have a conversation with me. That intensity is one place where it plays out. Every product team at Rippling, and we have a lot of them now, have public feedback channels. I am in there upside down on everything I find when I use those products. And I just model for everybody that this is how at least I want to do it, which is, I don't like this. I don't understand this. Tell me why this is this way. Boom, 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 boom. And people jump in and respond. The factory inspection process that I mentioned, which is where at the end of the assembly line, I jump out with the pickle and we talk about all of the elements. You have to record a loom of every major flow through the product. I personally review every one of those flows. I got a backlog I got to catch up on today, and provide feedback to people always in a public channel, so that every other product manager and engineering manager can jump in and see how the process has worked for other teams. It's about modeling the intensity publicly so that other people can say, okay, this is how we do things around here. And it gives the reaction from the team that received the message that you have to inject that energy every minute of every day and that there are no exceptions was not like, ooh, that's exhausting. The reaction is, oh, that is so invigorating. It's like so wonderful to hear that we're going to achieve these great outcomes, or at least we have a shot at doing so, and that you're empowering me to follow my instinct, which is to really like push for the best result. The reaction universally is like, ugh, what a relief that I get to go be intense, because nobody in a position of leadership wants to be chill, and like, what's worse than a chill boss? No, don't work for a chill boss. Don't be a chill boss. It's the most pejorative label I could give you. Chill boss or chill PM. Don't be chill. Chill doesn't accomplish shit. Be intense. Be good. Be respectful. Be intense. Don't be chill.
And again, this advice comes from where we started, which is this is what success looks like, because somebody that is less chill than you is going to find that crack and come after your market. Is that the gist?
For sure. I mean, again, if you're chill and you move the x-axis down 10 or 20 points, the y-axis collapses. It doesn't just drop 10 or 20%. The y-axis collapses. And this is just kind of true in everything we do. So yeah, if you want to win, you should probably try.
This is what I always say to people trying to build lifestyle businesses. There's always this idea, I'm going to build a side business. I'm going to make recurring income. It's going to be amazing. And in my experience, anytime there's a market or something shows up that's juicy and there's ways to make money, somebody's going to come at you and work harder, raise more money. And there's only so long you can maintain that.
Well, man, there's a whole other podcast episode on the concept of leverage. If you sell your time, you've only got 24 hours a day to give. But if you can create a product that scales, the marginal cost of a unit of that product is zero, like software, it's going to be competitive, man. Sell your time, it's not going to be super competitive, but like sell that, you achieve that level of leverage, and it's a pretty efficient market.
To close out this thread of intensity and adding energy to everything, something I've heard about you is you're big on escalating. You're a big fan of escalating issues. And also you always tell people to never not give you negative feedback, to always share feedback, to not hide anything.
Well,
Talk about those two.
Fundamentally, the most selfish thing you can do is withhold feedback from someone. Who are you optimizing for when you do that? What are you optimizing for when you think a thought that would help someone improve and you avoid giving it to them because it would make you uncomfortable? Well, you're optimizing for your own comfort. And it's fundamentally selfish. It's the most selfish thing you could possibly do, is withhold feedback that would otherwise be useful to someone because you don't want to be uncomfortable. Well, that's not how high performance teams operate. So I demand feedback and I give it. And doesn't mean that when I give feedback, it's not open to being questioned or discussed. I mean, of course it is. But like when I observe something, I try to say it. That's the feedback topic. The part of this that has been interesting to me is that people escalate, like customers withhold. Customers don't want to escalate to me as an executive. Even like the founders in whose businesses I've invested who use Rippling are reluctant to hit me up when something goes wrong because they don't want to bother me. But it's literally my job to find things, problems, and make them better. And by virtue of making those specific things better, to iterate on the processes so that the system that builds the system can get better. There's no greater gift to me as a product executive than receiving an escalation from a customer. We have an escalations team at Rippling, which sounds weird, but it's people who are just particularly skilled at pistol whipping other people in the company to get to real root causes, not like throw away the word root cause, like, oh, we fixed the data error and shut the ticket down. Like, no, you went and you found the software that created the data error, and then you found the system that created the software that created the data error, and you solved all of that back to the top. The escalation team is like extremely good at that at Rippling. So we have sort of a dedicated little team that does this for us. Escalations are a gift. And it's like, if you're a listener right now on this podcast and you are a Rippling customer and you have shit that you think we should know, the fact that I might already know it is not a reason for you to withhold the gift of your feedback. So it's an attitude that I take to this every day. I've got a little queue of some stuff that minor things that are from the last couple of days from people who had some nits and issues that I'm just like, I've got them queued up on my to-do list today, and I'm going to take them to the product teams directly and be like, I'd like to understand what happened here. Not in a negative way. I just think we'll all get better if we study this one. And so, yeah, escalations are a gift. Feedback like that is a gift, and nobody is ever inconveniencing me when they do it.
For people that are listening to this and feeling like, man, this is so stressful and intense and just like, oh, I don't know if I want to work this way, give them a sense of just how successful Rippling is. I think a lot of people may not even have heard of Rippling. A lot of people are like, yeah, it's doing great. What are some things you can share that are public or not public that give people a sense of just how massive this business has become?
People look at Rippling from the outside. I think they think of us as like payroll and HR or whatever, which is cool. Like it's a bit like saying Microsoft is a desktop operating system company, or it's like every company starts from somewhere and grows out from there. We see ourselves as building the most successful business software platform in history. In fact, that's the mission statement of our product organization under the umbrella of the mission statement of the company, which is to free smart people to work on hard problems. And like, when you translate that from where we are today to where we think we're taking things, it's like we really do believe that like the core of every workflow and everything that a company has to do, be it AI or manual, traditional GUI-based software, is who's doing stuff, who owns it, who's accountable. And so the people record is a really important component of that. You can argue that the customer record is also very important. And of course, some big businesses have been built on that primitive as well. But we think the people primitive is actually much more important. And the only thing that hasn't been done here is like somebody hasn't been ambitious enough to build a good business on top of that primitive. Workday is terrible software. Everybody agrees on that. I think Workday agrees on that. Good luck to them. But like they have failed, actually, despite their success, to build a really broad general purpose software platform for business software on the foundation of the people primitive. So we're going to do that. And we're successful because we deliver on that promise at the scale we're at today. Like the fact that you can do, and this is not a sales pitch or sort of like an advertisement for Rippling. I just think it's important to sort of contemplate that when you bring together a bunch of disparate business processes into one system on a common business data graph, an object graph, a data lake with a consistent interface, you can do some pretty magical things. So we do payroll, we do HCM, we do IT, we do spend. We are about to launch a new product in the category of business intelligence and data management. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff coming beyond that. And then you layer in AI on top of this, where we alone have all of your business data organized into this nice, neat package with a beautiful semantic layer on top of it. The AI can work magic. And we have shipped nothing yet in this category that I would say gets anywhere near what we're going to show next year. And it is going to set the standard. It is going to be the most, like the backflips that the AI is doing, reading and writing data for the user just on our internal use cases at Rippling is jaw dropping. So I'm super excited about the tailwind this is going to create for us. You ask about like sort of what can I share about the success of the company? What I can say, there are tens of thousands of companies that now run on Rippling. We're less than 1% of the market. And so the, and like the market cap at 16 billion, I think now undervalues where we are from a revenue perspective by a long shot. There is just so much upside to do what we're doing. And SaaS might be dead-ish in terms of point solutions, but long live SaaS in terms of what we're building.
Let me follow that thread. And in AI, there's been a lot of talk about AI is going to replace SaaS, as you maybe just said.
Yeah, people are going to vibe code their way to their payroll system, which good luck to the employees of those companies.
And so what I'm hearing here is that you actually do believe a lot of SaaS companies that are selling individual solutions are in big trouble. The answer is implied here is this kind of compound startup idea of you need to do a lot of things for people for them to continue to pay for your software. Is that the gist?
No, I think the gist is a really good quote. I forget who it's attributable to, but it's there's two ways to make money in software: bundling and unbundling. And you just gotta get the timing right. So this is a period of bundling. Here's the problem: point solutions don't have enough data in the age of AI to be useful. You got to be able to provide the AI with a lot of context about a lot of data so it can do things. It can do joins. It can do correlations. And so if you're a point solution, you're in hard water because you've got to now rely on data from other sources. You've got to integrate to third-party systems. And when you integrate to a third-party system, even the best ones are still sort of drinking their data through a straw, which is a real problem. I mean, there are the biggest HCM software company you can think of integrates to the other biggest payroll software company you can think of through flat files via SFTP. Like, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? It's just never going to work. It's just no way. And so I like literally have no idea what they're going to do. They're just not going to build AI software, I guess. Like Point SaaS is sort of in a rough spot, especially when you cleave two really important systems apart and say they have to integrate. It's very, very hard. The other thing that I would say about the world of even just like not SaaS but AI software is that point solutions in the AI world are also in a rough spot for the same reason. It's like if you're selling the shovels, like OpenAI and Google with Gemini, you can make money. And if you own the mine, like Rippling, with the data, you can make money. If you're somewhere in the middle building AI software that then tries to use the shovels from the shovel provider, but then also needs to rent out the mine or get the ore out of somebody else's mine and start refining it, like you're in a very difficult place from an economic standpoint, because you're not going to be permitted by either of those parties to build a big business on their backs. That's just not how it's going to work. They're going to demand value capture that crushes your unit economics. So I look at the like landscape of AI companies that I've seen, and I think you have to have a really durable, interesting insight that gives you a shot at viable unit economics to be an interesting business. And that is going to kill off 80 or 90% of the stuff that I see right now as standalone AI businesses.
So what I'm hearing here, I love that you correct me when I get these things wrong, and that's exactly what I want. What I'm hearing here is it's less about how difficult it is to build the SaaS product. It's about, do you have first-party data that allows you to build an incredible AI product on top of what you've got?
Yep. Because look, SaaS software is a bit flipping. All SaaS software applications are bit flippers. Like it's an interface to changing values in a database. What it does. It's a really hard problem. Like Rippling, one of Rippling's superpowers is we're a coin sorter. You dump $20,000 for an employee in the top of the coin sorter, and it figures out what goes to the government, what goes to health insurance, what goes to your 401k, what goes to you. And it has to move all that money very, very reliably and seamlessly. Very challenging software to build and manage. What's it doing? Even that is just flipping bits in a database. And so AI is a new way to flip bits. AI is just a new way to flip bits. Hopefully a way that like abstracts us a little bit further from having to think, because our future is WALL-E. It's going to be great.
Speaking of WALL-E, actually, I have this Matic robot. You have one of these? It's like a human. It's like a self-driving car robot. Basically, a self-driving car. People build this robot that cleans your house. It's maybe I didn't mention that. It's like a house cleaning robot that just goes around. It's like a Roomba. You should get one. They're expensive, but incredibly cool. And actually, in WALL-E, if there's a scene where they actually have what these things look like. So it's not so far fetched.
That movie was actually quite prescient, perhaps with the exception of the gravity-defying daybeds.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's not good news. You've seen that movie. Oh man. So on this AI stuff, which I'm hearing is we're going to see a lot more consolidation, where these point solution companies realize they need this data. This is existential, and they're going to combine and merge and bundle, as you described.
It's possible. I am not a prognosticator on this stuff. I think there are some really interesting investors out there who I think are thinking quite deeply about this, and in particular, the Conviction, which is like Mike Vernal and Sarah Goa. I think those are two investors who are hyper focused on AI. And when they made the decision to sort of take that approach, at the time I thought that's kind of narrow. Now I'm like, no, that was the right move. And it just means that they have a very deep set of hypotheses that they've formed over the course of kind of seeing every AI deal in the Valley. And, there are better people to ask this question of than I am. And I think if you're an entrepreneur, I recommend them to you because I think they're really smart.
Awesome. I love those guys. Also, Sarah and Elad have a podcast called No Priors that I'd also recommend. We'll point to in the show notes. So on this AI note, I guess, is there anything else that you think would be really helpful for founders that are working in this space, building an AI startup that you think you're seeing of here's what you need to do to win in an AI company?
Oh,
much.
I actually think that if I were to give you an answer to this question right now, it would be bullshit. Yeah. I don't have, back to my point earlier, I don't have enough relevant experience in the abstract to like dole out on a podcast on that topic. But I wish them luck.
I love that. The circling back to your advice, don't ask for advice, ask for a relevant experience. And I love that that's what your mind immediately went. I'm going to take us to AI Quarter, which is a recurring segment on this podcast. And the question is just, what's one way you've found AI to be useful in your work day to day? Is there something that you found it unlocked in how you work?
It's not a super exciting thing, but I'll say like where I use, one of the most important functions that I perform as an executive is the synthesis of ideas and the ability to communicate those ideas very clearly to people. So when I talk about like the product quality list and the pickle as something that we've come up with internally, I do turn to AI, ChatGPT and Gemini, where I take like a really, let's say, angular view of some topic, and I write the essay for the AI, and I'm like, look, this is the crisp idea I want to communicate. Help me come up with pithy ways to articulate these things. And 80% of what it outputs is trash. It's just like sort of middle of the road, average, low alpha junk. But it is a thought partner, a non-judgmental thought partner where like in 20% of the stuff it comes out with, I'm like, it's pretty good. That's a new word I didn't think of. That does kind of hit the nail on the head for this concept. And so if I believe that my job is to sort of bring brains along on the journey for some sort of change that I'm trying to bring about, then the most important tool is language. And I do find that ChatGPT and Gemini do a great job of helping me refine how to articulate the concepts that I want to articulate. They are not useful in coming up with the ideas themselves.
That's an awesome tip. I don't know if you've played with Claude much, but I actually find Claude is better at writing and words and language.
I have not spent a lot of time with Claude. I have used it, but by virtue of this conversation, I'll probably go give it
a shot.
Yeah,
they're all great, but there's something about Claude that is just at writing specifically is much better. But they're all getting better all the time. It's always there's always something new. Matt, we've covered so much ground. We've touched on everything I was hoping to touch on. Before we get to our very exciting lightning round, is there anything else that you were hoping to share? Anything else you wanted to touch on or leave listeners with?
We've spent a lot of time talking about intensity and the grind and the need to just always be operating at the 99th percentile. And I think if you listen to that in a vacuum, it's very easy to believe that intensity is soul crushing, that it's a negative, that it's maybe not something that you want. And I think there's a backstop for me that I didn't talk about today that I think is important to share, which is that life is amazing. That like the fact that we all exist on this blue marble drifting through space and time, that we are some weird instantiation of consciousness, each of us, and that you're here for such a short period of time, whittling your stick, doing something that like, if you remember how insignificant we are and all of this is, it brings this levity to what we do and to the work we put into building this, because this is like Silicon Valley in 2025 is Florence in the Renaissance. It's crazy. Like the amount of creativity and insane invention and progress that's happening for our species right now in this place is absolutely unparalleled in all human history. You got to zoom out and appreciate that magic. And so then you turn around and you're like, fuck, I got to work on Friday night, right? Like I've got to go give it my all. I've got to go compete in the arena of business. Just, you have to never forget that number one, none of this matters. And number two, it is an absolutely beautiful and amazing phenomenon that we get to be alive doing this right now. So like, play the sport, play it with everything you've got, but never forget that it's just a sport and that none of it matters. And it's super important as a counterpoint to the intensity that we talked about.
That is beautiful. I think about Pale Blue Dot, Carl Sagan's whole thing.
Just stunning photograph that literally changed the way I think about who I am as a person when I saw it. Yeah.
Well, going in a completely different direction with that, Matt, we reached our very exciting lightning round.
All right.
Got 5 questions for you. Are you ready?
Okay.
Here we go. What are 2 or 3 books that you find yourself recommending most to other people?
Okay, 2 or 3 books. You give me a heads up on this. So like one book is Conscious Business. I don't have Conscious Business in front of me because it's actually at the office, because we have Conscious Business Reading Club at Rippling, and every member of my product leadership team is going through this right now. Conscious Business, Fred Kaufman, it's been used in many businesses, LinkedIn most notably, as a framework for thinking about, effectively, it's a user manual for human beings. So if you are a leader, a manager, an executive, whatever, particularly younger, like people in their 20s and 30s who are just sort of getting the hang of being a CEO or a product leader for the first time, this book is absolute fucking gold. It was recommended to me by Brian Schreier at Sequoia when he was on my board at my previous company. I took way too long to take him up on the advice. Wished I had read it sooner. Highly recommend Conscious Business. Changes your life. Number 2, Thinking in Systems, Donna Meadows. I always mispronounce her name, Donella Meadows. She died partway through writing this manuscript. Her fellow professors picked it up and finished it for her. It is the best generic framework for thinking about like how systems work. You will extrapolate from this book to every aspect of your life after you read it. And then the third is classic 1960s, The Effective Executive. It's an anachronism. It uses weird pronouns for the secretary and the executive. I'll let you guess which ones. But like the book itself is so chock full of simple, enduring advice on how to be effective at leading teams. And the good shit is the stuff that's been in print for 70 years. And that's one of them.
Beautiful. I love the first one is you don't have it because you're using it with your team constantly. Yeah. You mentioned at one point before we started recording, you have like 8 copies of that book that you just give out to everyone.
Yeah, and we hand it out like candy.
Okay. Is there a favorite recent movie or TV show you've really enjoyed?
Yeah, so I'm a little embarrassed by this answer, but I'm going to be honest.
Please.
There's a new series called Heated Rivalry, and it's about, I'm Canadian and I'm gay. So it's about 2 hockey players in Canada, rivals between the Bruins and the Maple Leafs, although they don't use those names, who are like just heated rivals on the ice. And it's a huge thing that the world is watching, but actually they're secretly in love with each other, and they start hooking up. And it's been labeled by the media as smutty but delightful, and I would say that's accurate. So it might not be for everybody, but it is a smash hit right now. It's on HBO Max and Crave, and it's only 6 episodes, but like I said, a little embarrassing because it's very it's a little chintzy, but it's a lot of fun. It's also really fun to see like gay people represented in the media as though they're normal.
And soon to be on Netflix with the acquisition if that goes through.
Oh yeah,
that's
crazy.
Amazing. Okay. Is there a favorite product you recently discovered that you really love?
My Fellow coffee maker. I love My Fellow coffee maker. It's got an interface that lets you like set light, medium, dark roast. It changes the temperature. It blooms the coffee. It tells you how many grams of coffee to put into the basket. Slick interface, high quality coffee. It's definitely awesome. And so I actually have one in the office and one at home and one in the garage.
Wow. That is a favorite product. You have 3 of them in the same space.
Yeah.
Oh no, in the office. Okay.
Fellow is also a Rippling customer, and that's like a nice side effect when we get to.
Have they ever escalated anything to you?
No. If you're listening and you're from Fellow, I want to hear all your gripes.
Perfect. 2 more questions. Do you have a favorite life motto that you find yourself coming back to often in work or in life?
It's a dark one, and I'll share this one sort of partially for the humor of it, but it's actually sometimes useful. Immediately, at least it's sort of a moment of smiling when it happens. It's like the motto comes from my dad, who said, "Matt, nothing's ever so bad in life that it couldn't get worse." And it's like, we were going through some shit yesterday at work, and we were like, fuck, now that happened. And I looked at the CTO and I'm like, dude, nothing's ever so bad that it couldn't get worse. And we had a good laugh and continued to brace for whatever might come next. So not exactly uplifting, but fun to use.
No, it is uplifting. It's like, I'm an optimist, and I find myself thinking that often with my wife, just like, it could be worse. It could be worse than this.
Definitely.
It's actually really useful.
And it might get there.
So let's enjoy this less worse version. Final question. Something you shared with me is that you were a DJ when you were a younger person. Can you just give us a little DJ voice to give people a sense of your
so
other
first of
skills?
all, it's not DJ, Lenny. It's radio personality.
Okay.
And yeah, I used to do the greatest hits of all time with hits from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and a little bit of the 90s. 101.5 The Hawk. Yeah, You can turn it on. It's very inauthentic, but it sounds good on the radio. It's cool. I did it when I was in high school. I ended up doing the midday segment when right before I went to college, and what a gift! What a huge gift in my most formative years to have developed like an ability to be in front of a microphone comfortably. Because here we are.
I love, for people that weren't watching this YouTube, you like lean really close to the mic to get that radio personality voice.
Yeah, you got to be able to hear like the saliva in the mouth.
Incredible. It's like the same person talking. Like if you're not watching this, you're like, where did that guy come from? That was great. You nailed it. Matt, this was incredible. I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate you sharing all this advice that I have not heard other people share. 2 final questions. Is there something you want to plug, point people to, and how can listeners be useful to you?
Look, my life is rippling. I point people there, and this is my life's work. It's gonna be a banger. So stay tuned. And the way that you can help me is that if you're a customer, you got to tell me when you have problems, because that's how we get better.
What's the way they get to you? Is there any place you want to point people to?
DM me on Twitter is easy at Stay9. You can email me, my last name at rippling.com. And I'll go that far without giving out my phone number. How's that?
Perfect. The perfect boundary.
Yeah.
Matt, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Lenny, and congrats on all the success with this podcast. It's been great.
Same to you. It's always a good sign at the end of a conversation. We're like, I got to get me some of that stock, got to get into that rippling. So
it's a good buy.
Great job.
Yeah, recommended buy. But but you're
hard to get, hard to come by. All right, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.
There's rarely a time like this where so much is possible. Even like 5-7 years ago, it's so hard to start a company. Everything feels like it's done. Someone else is working on it. Suddenly, it's a time right now, which I've never even experienced, where everything you try just works.
With people constantly hearing about all the things happening, is there any tools or processes or approaches you've figured out to help stay focused?
Our engineering goal is every engineer should ship a marketable product every week.
I love just how wild that sounds. How do you maintain quality and make it all cohesive?
I actually think as a startup, your job is to take on technical debt, because that is how you operate faster than a bigger company. Bigger companies don't take on technical debt. They pay it usually right away, or they're paying back technical debt from the days when they were a startup.
Is there anything else that in how you operate and the way you build product that you think is really unique and interesting?
We have what we think of as the public roadmap. This is basically what people have asked us for. There's all these surface areas we receive user feedback, but these are all features that every competitor knows about. If a user is asking us for it, they're asking everybody for it. It's not going to be a game changer in terms of winning against your competition. So we have a second roadmap, which we think of as a secret roadmap.
Today, my guest is Gaurav Misra. Gaurav was an early employee at Snap, where he led the design engineering team, which he explains in the conversation. He was also an engineer at Microsoft and a couple other companies. Most recently, he's the co-founder and CEO of Captions, one of the most successful and cutting-edge consumer AI products, which lets you generate and edit talking videos with AI. They have over 10 million users and have raised over $100 million. In our conversation, we essentially do an archaeology of how a modern AI-oriented startup operates, including how every single engineer at their company ships a marketable product or feature every single week, why they have a secret roadmap in addition to a regular roadmap. We also get in depth about how Snap as a product team operated, what he's learned about what it takes to build a successful consumer and social app, why they had no PMs, and how designers ran the show, which may or may not have been a great idea, and also what happens in a world where AI video is so good that you have no idea if it's real or not. This episode is for anyone that is building a product on top of AI. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcasting app. And also, I just launched an insane deal for subscribers of my newsletter. Every yearly subscriber now gets a year free of Notion, Perplexity, Superhuman, Linear, and Granola. Learn more at lennysnewsletter.com. With that, I bring you Gaurav Misra. This episode is brought to you by Brex, the financial stack used by 1 in every 3 US venture-backed startups. Brex knows that nearly 40% of startups fail because they run out of cash. So they built a banking experience that focuses on helping founders get more from every dollar. It's a stark difference from traditional banking options that leave a startup's cash sitting idle while chipping away at it with fees. To help founders protect cash and extend runway, Brex combined the best things about checking, treasury, and FDIC insurance in one powerhouse account. You can send and receive money worldwide at lightning speed, you can get 20x the standard FDIC protection through program banks, and you can earn industry-leading yield from your first dollar while still being able to access your funds anytime. To learn more, check out Brex at brex.com/banking-solutions. That's brex.com/banking-solutions. This episode is brought to you by Paragon, the integration infrastructure for B2B SaaS companies. Is AI on your 2025 product roadmap? Whether you need to enable RAG with your users' external data, like Google Drive files, Gong transcripts, or Jira tickets, or build AI agents that can automate work across your users' other tools, integrations are the foundation. But building all these integrations in-house will cost you years of engineering, time you don't have given the fast pace of AI. That's where Paragon's all-in-one integration platform comes in. Build scalable workflows to ingest all of your users' external data into your RAG pipelines, and leverage ActionKit, their latest product, to instantly give your AI agents access to over 100 integrations and thousands of third-party actions with a single API call. Leading AI companies like AI.21, U.com, 11x, and Coffee.ai are already shipping new integrations 7 times faster with Paragon, keeping their engineers focused on core product development. Ready to accelerate your AI roadmap this year? Visit useparagon.com/Lenny to get a free MVP of your next product integration. Gaurav, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Excited.
I very rarely have early stage founders on the podcast, but I wanted to chat with you because you're at the center of so much of what is top of mind for a lot of builders these days. AI and video and just consumer and social apps, also going viral and finding new marketing channels. So I think there's a lot that people can learn from the way you approach product, the way you build product, and the way you just think about where things are going. So again, thank you for being here.
Appreciate it. Honestly, it's an exciting time. Like, I gotta say, like, there's rarely a time like this where, where so much is possible. Like in normal times, if you think about like, even like 5-7 years ago, it's so hard to start a company. It's so hard to come up with an idea, right? Like, it's just like, everything feels like it's done. Someone else is working on it, right? Like, oh, it's been tried 3 times and failed 3 times. And like, suddenly it's a time right now, which like, I've never even experienced, honestly, in my career, right? Where everything you try just works. There's so many possibilities. There's not enough people in the world to work on them. Like, honestly, right? Like, there's more things that can be done than there's people available to do them, right? It's just such a rare thing. And honestly, it's not going to last forever, right? Like, we are going to catch up to this, but just feels lucky to be, part of that movement. It's awesome.
When you said everything is working, I think what's an important distinction there is like the building of the tool works. Like the tech is now there to build all these things that have not been possible before. The thing that is increasingly difficult, and I want to get your take on this, is getting anyone to pay attention and stick with your thing. Because it's so easy to build stuff and everything is just awesome and interesting, it's harder to get people to pay attention and stick with your product. So I guess, is there anything there you've learned? You've built a number of successful products. We'll talk about Snap and what you're doing now, about just, I don't know, what you need to think about these days to get anyone to pay attention and then stick around.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a great point. And I think there is a lot of hype, obviously, right? And part of it, that's kind of what's driving a lot of this growth for a lot of companies, right? And I think from like a user acquisition / marketing perspective, right? Like, in a world 5 or 7 years ago, if you were making something novel and you went to users and you was like, oh, we got something better, right? Like, people are going to be like, well, whatever. Everybody says they got something better, right? I don't care, right? But today, and this is not, probably the way you should do it, but you can go and just say like, we've rethought this thing with AI, right? And a bunch of people will just be like, well, how? Or maybe I should check this out, right? They'll just try it. Obviously, you have to deliver on the promises, right? Like, if you don't deliver, people will come in, they'll like play around a bunch and then just leave, right? But if you can truly deliver on the promises, there's great opportunities to acquire users at scale. So I think that's slightly different. And I don't know how long that lasts, but it is definitely a different time from that perspective. I do think also, at the core of building products is solving problems. I think a lot of people sort of get caught up in this, well, it's cool, and people will come for the cool right now, right? Like people will come in and be like, well, let me check it out. It's cool. But at the end of the day, like if you're just building a playground and people play around in the playground and then they leave after playing around, it's not a business, right? So I think that is still key, right? You have to be solving real problems.
As you were talking, I'm thinking about like every day there's something that would maybe a few years ago be like news for a year. Holy shit, this is now possible. Now it's like every day something like that happens. And then we're like, all right. So what I think about is like, we'll have AGI one of these days or super intelligence and everyone's doing, oh, amazing. And then, okay, what's for dinner?
Isn't that already happening? Like think about like, in a way, like I kind of self-reflect on this sometimes of like, you've seen Iron Man and stuff, like they have the Jarvis thing, and you've seen like Interstellar and they have like the TARS machine, right? And they're talking back and forth with these things, like bouncing ideas. And that is science fiction. That's literally science fiction. Okay, it's not perfect, but it exists in a way that nobody could have imagined. That's science fiction has become reality. And I feel like nobody cares, right? In a way, like you would have expected the world to be turned upside down, but it feels like almost in a way so slow. And like people are like, yes, there's adoption is happening, but like, I feel like it's almost a shocking development in a way.
It feels like you guys have done a good job staying top of mind and continuing to get people excited because to your point, there's so much happening. How do you get people to continue to be like, oh, okay, wow, what they're building is actually is interesting and continues to be interesting? Anything you've learned about just what it takes to stay top of mind and continue to pull people back and get people re-excited over and over?
100%. I mean, I think honestly, it just comes down to like, not just AI for the sake of AI or AI for the sake of excitement or hype or novelty or whatever that is, right? It's actually effective AI, like AI that solves real problems, practical problems, right? And, the fundamentals haven't changed, right? In a way, there's 3 steps to building products. You identify a user problem, you apply some technology to solve that problem, but then finally, you have some mechanism to find people who have that problem, right? If you can do all 3 of those things, then in any environment, you can create great products. But I think right now, what's different is so much is changing on the technology side that you can create products that could not have been created before and solve problems that could not have been solved before. And that's what's creating the opportunity, right? And for us, especially in the video space, it's truly endless, right? Like we've just begun. And like our goal specifically for video is not to build professional tools, right? We're not building for professionals at all. We're building for the person who could not have created video before, right? They didn't have the tools, the skills, the means to be able to create video, and now they can because they're able to jump over that skill gap, right? Or that time gap. Maybe they're business owners. They don't have time, right? They want results. And honestly, a lot to solve there, right? Just tons.
Solve people's problems. We've easier said than done, but it's a good reminder. Like in the end, that's all that matters. Something that I always think about with people in your shoes is just how do you not get overwhelmed and how do you know what to pay attention to? How do you stay focused? Any tips there for folks that are just reading every day a new announcement and then just like, what do I do? There's too much.
It is the new problem of product development in a way, right? There's too many possible paths you can go down. There's too many ideas. There's too many, things you could do. And I mean, obviously prioritization is always an important skill set and has always been, but it's becoming an even more important skill set right now because you have to figure out what not to pay attention to. Our general framework for it is to look for user demand, right? And actually the easiest way to check for user demand is to just see what has virality, right? Usually what has virality, what people want to share and talk about, there's something at the core of it that actually is interesting. Now, it may not always be interesting in a way that's like, maybe it's a one-time use case. Maybe it's not something that people would do repeatedly. Maybe it's not something you could build like a subscription business off of. But oftentimes there's some core sort of element of it that has resonated with people. And if you can identify that core and then, mold it into fitting into your business, it's actually a great way to identify like what actually works. And we have these tools right now. We don't have to build anything. you can just kind of talk about it and people will share the idea, right? And you can kind of measure how well the product might be received even before you've built anything, right? So it's a great tool we use for like prioritization. We spend a lot of time on social media. Obviously, like our app is often used for social media. So a lot of our employees will spend a lot of time on social media. We look at what the trends are, what's happening. And based on that, we can get a pretty good read of what might resonate well with people.
So as a leader of a company with people constantly hearing about all the things happening, is there any tools or processes or approaches you've figured out to help people continue, like stay focused, not get excited about every shiny new object and, actually ship things?
I mean, honestly, it's all about incrementality in a way, right? Like I think we do aim to ship every week, right? So like our engineering goal is every engineer should ship a marketable product every week. And so what's a marketable product? It's a product that you can show to users and the user might subscribe or pay for the app just for that, or come to the app essentially just for that. And that's why like table stakes features, like, let's say we're talking about like a word processor or something, if you had like auto format or, just table stakes stuff like justify alignment or something, no one's going to come to your word processor for justify alignment, right? Like you can market that, right? Because it's obvious, right? Of course it exists. But if you did something unique that nobody else has done, you can go and show that to people and people will come to your app just for that. And even if your app doesn't have a lot of the obvious stuff, maybe it doesn't have justify alignment, right? People will jump over that just to kind of use sort of these new tools and new abilities that you might be building in marketing. So we try to do every engineer one marketable feature per week. And yeah, a lot of that stuff may not work, right? But a lot of it does work. And we can figure out, obviously, where to put in more effort. Things that start to work, we double down on those things, build more. People often complain because think about it, like in 1 week where we're shipping, it's not complete. It's MVP, truly. And we slice the hell out of it, right? Like we take the design and we cut until we can really say that it's going to be useless if we cut anymore. We get that out and people come in, and if things are going well, people will use it despite all the problems that it might have. And now people will complain and we'll have a list of problems and we know what to do next. So that's a starting point essentially. So as long as we're shipping one a week, we get a ton of volume of like features and products and directions we're releasing, cut a lot of that. What remains, expand from there, right? So it works really well and it keeps people focused.
I love the simplicity of that. I love just how wild that sounds for a lot of companies, I imagine. Every engineer ships a marketable feature or product every week.
Yes.
There's some people listening to this and are just like completely stressed out by this idea. And there's some people listening are like, this is exactly how I want to work. This is how every company should build.
Yep.
How do you maintain quality and make it all cohesive? I imagine that's the big trade-off. Just any tricks there for folks that want to maybe start operating this way?
Quality is not something to compromise on most of the time, right? I think, yes, there's strategic compromises on quality, but most of the time what you want to do is have a bar for quality where people should come in and if they're using the feature, like it should work, right? Of course, right? And the way to cut down on time, and I think this is the mistake people make a lot of the time, is when time is being pressured downward, a lot of times engineers, PMs, designers, they will cut on quality rather than cutting on scope. And actually, you can cut on scope. It's actually, the method that we use is we look at every element that's going to take any time to build. And we just say, what if we remove this? Is the product still useful? And we keep repeating that until we remove whatever's left and we say it's going to be useless at this point. And that becomes the 1 week project, right? Yeah, it actually really works, right? It kind of narrows down to the core of what you're really trying to ask. So for example, let's say we wanted to build something to add an image, on your video or something like that, right? And this is like, a really basic idea. I kind of just made it up right now. And you might imagine a design in which you import your image from your camera roll, but before it lands in your video, you might want to remove the background, right? You might want to, change the hue and saturation or something like that. And you might expect like a designer to like design all of those features, right? And you kind of land a design, but you really quickly realize that you can cut all of that stuff, right? You can cut the background removal, you can cut the hue saturation. All you really need is pick, and then there might be a picker. We need a picker with a library with a lot of different, what if you want to pull from the cloud? What if you want to pull from, the drive or something like that? Cut all of that, right? And essentially come down to the core, which is just like, native picker from the camera, lands straight in the video, no UI. And that should be useful. If that's not useful, then anything else built on top of that is also useless, right? So that's kind of how we might go about it.
That last sentence is so key to this. Like, it's the core idea of ship small iterative features before you invest a lot in something to first figure out, is there anything there? Is this worth spending weeks on?
Totally. And I think like the coolest part of this method is like the first thing that the users will come in, they'll use the thing, they'll import images. And the first thing they'll complain about is what kind of bothers them the most. Is it hue and saturation? Is it background removal? Is it like picking from the cloud, right? Like you'll just get the most complaints about that thing. People will be like, and people will be honest about it. They'll be like, this sucks, right? It doesn't even have background removal. What kind of image thing is this, right? And you kind of have to take that feedback, and just next week you can ship in a single week all the things that the user's complaining about, right?
And then they're like, wow, this team is shipping like crazy, solving all my problems, so responsive. This connects a kind of a common sign of product market fit, which is when people are complaining about the thing, that means they actually care enough to complain. And that's a really good sign if they're complaining about something.
Very true. Very true. If nobody complains, it's almost a red flag,
I love this turning into kind of an archaeology of a modern product team and startup. So I want to keep digging. This is not where I was planning to go, but this is awesome. I love that this approach of every engineer shipping something every week that's marketable connects directly to where I started this conversation, which is how do you stay above the noise? And part of the answer is just ship stuff constantly and just continue to impress people. Like, here's a new amazing video feature. Here, look at this thing.
Exactly. Yep. I think it's definitely key, right? And there's enough area and enough scope for that to happen, right? Like, I think truly in normal times, it may not be possible to create that much roadmap that quickly. But I think because there's so much innovation underlying all this, there is that scope available, right? Like the roadmap almost seems unlimited, right? Like just truly.
Okay. The other question I imagine people would be wondering is how do you work on longer term projects that take many weeks? There's also infrastructure, I guess, backend stuff.
Yep.
So maybe answer those questions. How do you think about long term stuff? And then how do you deal with backend stuff that isn't a feature that anyone would care?
Yep. So usually we'll dedicate time to that separately. So for example, usually Q4 for us is infrastructure quarter, right? We just like go and build all the infrastructure. Q4 is generally, we've already delivered a ton of products and stuff. We're feeling pretty good about the rest of the year. Things are winding down, obviously holidays and stuff coming up. And so we spend all that time paying the technical debt, right? I actually think there's a unique thing to think here about like technical debt in general. And, as a startup, your job is to take on technical debt, right? Because that is how you operate faster than a bigger company, right? Bigger companies don't take on technical debt. They pay it usually right away, or they're paying back technical debt from the days when they were a startup, right? And they took on a lot of it, right? I used to work at Snap, and there was a lot of examples of that over there, right? So, and I'm sure it happens at every other company, right? And we think about it as like, well, is this a problem we need to solve today? Or is this a problem that the 50th engineer or the 100th engineer or the 500th engineer can solve, right? And if it is a problem that a future engineer can solve, we should use that future engineer now. Essentially, that's what we're doing. And we're saying we're going to push this to somebody in the future. And by the way, if the company fails, that engineer will never be hired, right? And all this won't matter anyways, right? So it's kind of like financial debt in many ways. Financial debt is taken on to create leverage. It can be a good thing, right? Like if you're buying a house, you take on debt and you can buy something probably more than you can afford without taking on debt, right? I think it's the same thing. You can create products that you wouldn't be able to build with a small team that you have by taking on strategic technical debt. It's very positive, actually.
Wow, this is such a cool idea. And where my mind goes is that future engineer may be an AI agent engineer.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Just solving problems, just technical debting you.
Exactly. Some engineer in the future, 500th engineer many years from now will get a promotion because they solved this big problem that those really bad, early engineers created.
So obviously there's a line to this. Like you don't want to, there's like only so much debt you can take on before you become a big problem. Is there any thoughts on just that balance of just like how much is too much and how you know if it's enough for a future engineer or just like...
Yeah. I mean, I think generally the rule of thumb is, every piece of debt that you take on, you have to pay interest on, right? So if there is debt that you've taken on, there's 1% or 2% of your time that is going to be taken away every day in maintaining bugs and issues and restarts and crashes and things that are happening with that because you did it the fast way. Something's going to go wrong with it. Every day, 1% of your time will be taken away. If you take on enough debt, you'll be paying 80 or 90% interest, and you'll not have any time to do anything new. You'll just be paying interest. That's all. And that's when you get into the mode of like, oh, we're just keeping the lights on. We don't have any engineers do anything. We're just keeping the lights on. That's the failure case for a startup, right? So in a way, you have a technical debt runway, right? Once you run out, once you take on too much debt, and if you haven't delivered value in that time, enough value to hire the engineers to pay the interest or just pay off the debt, you will get in trouble.
I love that. That's such a nice heuristic of how to think about when to invest in something. I don't want to go down this too far, but just a thought I have is, sometimes there's big technical decisions you got to make that impact the way everything builds or is built in the future. I imagine those you spend more time on and take really seriously.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think as long as it's possible for wherever it's like a two-way door, you can kind of do whatever you want. I mean, this is a classic methodology, right? If it's a one-way door, it's worth thinking about and sort of doing correctly, at least as much as the one-way door would matter to you in the future.
How much do your engineers use Cursor and tools like that to build? Like, how much is AI helping your team move
100%.
faster?
Yeah. I mean, everybody's using it. It's super helpful. I mean, even I'm using it, honestly. It's a huge multiplier for the team, no doubt.
And is it Cursor specifically? Is there anything else that you guys found useful?
We are using Cursor. Yep. We've tried all the different tools. We're using Devon as well, which is another, that's more advanced, I guess. It's kind of solving bugs for you.
Yeah, Devon's basically, I think it's $500 a month, and it's like an AI engineer that you just chat with in Slack.
Exactly. Yeah. And, in a way, these are the types of things that us as a startup can do that bigger companies can't just, they can't just pull in Devon, right? They have to, get 30 lawyers in the room first before that happens.
Yeah, and they're all called Devon, right? These like agents, like everyone's gonna have like hundreds of Devons working at their company.
Exactly. You can have multiple Devons. I actually heard you can have a manager of Devons who's managing Devons.
I love that managers are all getting unlayered, and then they're gonna have AI managers. That's the ultimate, the ultimate bait and switch. Okay.
Yep.
Is there anything else that in how you operate and build the way you build product, or set up the way you build product, that you think is really unique and interesting that other people might be able to learn from?
Our process is a bit interesting in that way. Like, we have a design team, we have a PM team. I mean, we're very early on those teams right now. And obviously we have engineering, and we have all the different surface areas. So iOS, Android, web, right? There's backend team, machine learning team, research team. So generally, like when we're developing products, we may start off with like a PM first approach, where we're kind of, finding some sort of overall issue that we want to take on, some new area or pillar we want to take on, and then creating sort of product specs from there. But a lot of times we'll also start the opposite way, where we'll first design something, right, without even having any idea of what or why we're doing it. But we'll design a bunch of different things, and then we'll sit down with the PMs and look at the designs and just go over one and the next until we find interesting things and ideas that kind of pop out of that. And a lot of times that leads to us discovering, right, like things that we wouldn't have discovered if we were just like too focused on the metrics and the numbers and, things like that. So it's like almost reversing the process a little bit and starting with design first, but it can often result in like finding unique ideas, basically. I also think that we have a unique setup in how we create our roadmap. So normally, you have a single roadmap, right? And we actually divide our roadmap into two different roadmaps. So we have what we think of as the public roadmap. This is basically what people have asked us for, right? So like, there's all these surface areas where we receive user feedback, and we look at all that feedback, and people will ask for features. Like, they'll ask for like, I want background removal. I want like to undo and redo. I want to like upload longer videos, whatever it is, right? A bunch of different features. And we'll just make a list of that, and just like anything else, we'll prioritize it, and we'll look at how many people it affects and what the possible markets are, and like just get it done, basically, right? One at a time. But these are all features that every competitor knows about, right? Like, these are public. Like if a user is asking us for it, they're asking everybody for it. And every team has essentially more or less the same list, and everybody's prioritizing it. And yeah, sure, you can win a little by like extra nicely prioritizing it, or winning a little in prioritization or execution or something, but it's not going to be a game changer in terms of winning against your competition. So we have a second roadmap, which we think of as a secret roadmap. So this is a roadmap that nobody asked for anything on this. Like literally nobody has ever asked for it. And if a user were shown something on it, they might be like, I don't need this. I don't know what this is. But given our unique vantage point, our unique understanding of the problem set, the user space, and the technology, we've come up with some special ideas that we think will completely revolutionize how something is used, right? Where we can truly change the behavior of the user. And I think that's what it is at the core of it, right? Is like people are doing things one way. If we're able to show them another way, and once they try it, they never go back, that's what a product is, right? That's success, right? And those are the types of ideas we put on the secret roadmap. These are things we never talk about publicly, never tell anybody about. And we announce them and just give them to users, right? And see the effects. A lot of this we come up with through brainstorming. So we actually do quarterly brainstorming company-wide. Everybody's included, like everybody from, it's not just a product team thing. It's like engineering, recruiting, everybody's included in it. And we all come up with marketing, obviously. Like everybody comes up with ideas. We vote on the ideas, rank the ideas, and then the product team takes over from there and thinks about like feasibility and technology and what the different things could be. So this is a way where we can take all that noise that people are getting, like everybody's browsing social media, seeing all these like different things that are blowing up, these models and advancements, and we can get all that information together and provide sort of a unique internal roadmap, right? Where how are we going to approach and create value out of all of these different advancements that are happening. So that's our general methodology. And a lot of times the biggest wins will come from the secret roadmap, right? That's the game-changing stuff, right? It's not going to be the user requests usually that are going to do that.
I love just how calling it the secret roadmap makes it especially like extra interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a secret.
It's a secret. I'm not even going to ask you what's on that secret roadmap. You can't tell me. What's an example of feature that came out of that secret roadmap that's been a big deal for you guys?
Tons. I mean, I'll give you an example from a long time ago. One of the first sort of AI features we added after sort of the app initially took off was this feature called eye contact. So this was a feature where if you're recording something, oftentimes like, people who are new to recording a video might read from a script or a teleprompter or something like that. And they might have that like off screen. So it kind of looks like you're reading, and, it's not great from like the perspective of the video itself or the viewer of the video. So we had this feature where it basically shifts your eyes to look at the camera. And we were actually the first company to build this. We worked with NVIDIA on this. It's actually really interesting because when we originally reached out to NVIDIA about this, they were kind of not sure why we needed this, right? And they actually gave it to us pretty openly. And we're excited about some sort of partnership of like how can we get this technology into like something that could be useful. But we saw sort of this creator use case, which was unique. And, it was one of the ideas that came out of the brainstorm, and we threw it on there. We launched it. It was a huge success. I mean, I'll be honest, like the video, the ad that we made, like a social media post that demonstrates this, was so viral. It was made in basically every language around the world. It still till today like gets millions of views. Like we find reposts and reposts of that thing that other people have created that get millions and millions and millions of views because people are like, wow, this is a great idea. And now it's been like copied the hell out of. Like I think it's available basically on every every app you can imagine, for good reason, of course. But that's one of the ideas that came out of it.
You talked about how you come up with these secret roadmap ideas. I'm just intrigued by this. I'm going to spend a little more time here. Does your team ever work with an AI LLM to help brainstorm? I imagine that's where things will go, where you're actually jamming, like the AI agent is brainstorming along with you.
Honestly, I would like for it to go there. It hasn't gone there yet. Like we haven't done that exactly because the problem is context. And I think just the context of understanding the user, the use case, it's so abstract even right now. Like I feel like I understand our users, obviously, but I can't exactly verbalize why that is or how that is. It's a little bit abstract, right? And I spend a lot of time with RPMs and designers, like imparting anything that I understand and I've learned over the many years. I've been working on this. How do I impart this to them, right? But then it's a challenge because I can't even verbalize it myself. And so it's an extra hard challenge to figure out, how do I put this context, how do I make it available to an LLM when I can't even put it into words exactly? And honestly, this is probably my own failing, and I need to work on this, but there is something to it. I do remember at Snap, for example, right? I think one of the most unique things about Snap and the CEO, Evan Spiegel, was that he had an unmatched understanding of the user. I think years and years and years of the company's existence passed, right? Like almost a decade, and nobody understood the user like he did, right? Like he would come up with ideas that everybody would disagree with, and we would launch them and they would be hits, just hits after hits, right? And nobody would understand why. Everyone would line up and be like, great, like round of applause for everyone, right? But no one knew why. And a great example of that is like, and a lot of this was figured out in retrospect too. Like, I think there was a point at which Snap declared that they're a camera company. And a lot of people laughed at that. I was like, camera, like, what are we making, like digital cameras or something? Or like, why is it a camera company? But I think at the core of it was this idea that Snapchat opens to the camera. And that was actually the differentiator, right? That was actually, that small decision was holding the entire company against all competition. Because when the moment passes where your friend is doing something funny and you need to capture it, you're not going to open Instagram or anything else because it doesn't open to the camera. You're going to open Snapchat, right? Because you can capture it right away. And Instagram can never copy that because all their metrics are going to go down as soon as they do that. So, that is a fundamental understanding, right? And I figured this out much later, actually, but it's such a powerful idea.
I'm glad you talked about Snap. That's where I definitely wanted to go. This is where I was going to start. So I'm glad we circled back to your experience at Snap. So the reason I am interested in this is, if you think about social networks, this, like Snap was basically the last social network to have launched and stuck around, other than TikTok, which I don't think is a social network. I think it's just kind of this like content platform. I don't think you're really interacting with people really. And that was 2011 when it launched. So it's been like 15 years since the last social network launch that has worked. And I think it's interesting also because there's rarely been a lot of insight into just how Snap operates. You were there really early. You're a big deal at Snap. You built a lot of really important features. So I wanted to spend a little time here, and it feels like a lot of things you learned from Snap, you're bringing to your company now. So let me just ask, I think you may have answered this, but I'm curious if there's something else here of just broadly, maybe other than Ev's brain, what do you think was core to Snap being a successful consumer social product?
There were a couple of different things that went well. I do think for a company like Snapchat or a social network, the core product market fit can be extremely strong, right? Like essentially the reason that people are downloading it, the way that it's spreading, the way that it's distributing, the way that it's inviting friends or sending snaps or whatever it is, right? That product market fit can be so strong sometimes that it can be hard to actually build something, because you actually can't tell if what you're building is what's responsible for growing the thing, or if it's actually hurting it, and it's growing despite what you're doing, basically, right? And I think because of that, it actually sometimes teaches people the wrong things. It teaches people that the contrarian thing that they were doing was right when it was actually just wrong, and the company just grew despite it, right? And I think some of the things that Snap did well, and it needed to do really, was to continue innovating, right? Because for a company like Snap, it has a ton of competition. Social networks are monopolies by nature. And there's a lot of reasons for Facebook or any other social network to stop the growth of Snapchat. And they tried really, really hard. And the way that Snap was avoiding that was by innovating. I think at the core of it was the setup that they had, which was very unique. Like I've never seen anything like it. I've worked at a bunch of different companies, but obviously there's a CEO, and the CEO was very product led. He was a designer himself, right? But he surrounded himself with the design team, right? That was sort of the central team in the company. And the design team was like 10, 12 people, basically pretty small. Even at, 5, 6,000 employees, it was that small
Oh,
still.
wow. At 5 or 6,000 employees, the design team was, you said how many? 5 or 6 people?
10, 12 people.
10, 12.
basically. Yep.
And all to add to that, there's no PMs really, like for a long time. That
For
was
a
the
long
core-
time, yeah.
big difference
Initially, there
too.
were no PMs at all. PMs were introduced with monetization. Once monetization was a big sort of element, that's kind of where PMs came in. Today, I think there's there's an adequate number of PMs across the company, but there was a long period of time, especially when the innovation was happening, when there were a much smaller number of PMs, and it was very designer led. But at the same time, like I think that's slightly misleading in the way that these weren't your sort of average designers, right? These were designers who were actually PMs as well. That's kind of what the secret sauce was. They were able to not just design, but also do the PM part, and which is a big responsibility. It's a lot of work, especially for that many employees, right? But it gave the CEO a way to sort of have granular control over what exactly was being launched in which part of the app at all times, right? Because he could meet with a set of 10 or 12 people and know every change that was happening that was user impacting. A lot of changes were being worked on that were like infrastructure and like, types of things that kind of keep going on in the back end. We're improving ranking and whatever that might be, right? And performance and things like that. And those were not usually his concern. He was concerned with what UI are we adding where? And if you needed to add UI to the app, you needed it designed. And if there's no designers in the company except for a handful who talk directly to the CEO, you kind of create a very granular control over what's being launched in the company, right? So everything needed to be approved by Evan. If you hadn't approved it, it's not going out. So the design team actually held a lot of power in that.
This is awesome. So what I'm hearing partly is, like, I don't know if this is true, but it feels true that to make a consumer app that is successful and breaks through, you almost need like a singular mind that continues to stay in the weeds on everything. And the way Evan did that is stay very close to the design team who basically ran product.
That's very true. Yeah, it's very true. And he was able to keep the context of the entire app right in his head at the same time. He knew the interdependencies and what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so that gave him just very granular control over the company's product roadmap.
It makes me think about Rachitsky, and like Airbnb is a consumer product. It's not a social network, but I wonder if that's just an interesting insight. Just for consumer products, they will generally do better if there's one person with a really the right sort of combination of experiences, insights, and just they continue to run and own every detail.
Definitely. And also the ability to bring about change, right? The ability to truly, energize an entire organization to do something that's not just incremental, but fundamental, right?
Founder mode.
Exactly.
Founder mode.
I mean, that's what we're getting to, basically.
Yeah. Ever heard of it? Okay. And then you said that these designers, so I know it's like famous that Snap had no PMs for a long time. Designers were PMs. This point you made about the designers were PME is really important, because I think a lot of people look at this, they're like, amazing, we're just going to hire designers. We don't need all these damn PMs. Slow everything down. Just tell us what not to build. Can you just talk about like the level of these designers, like what allowed them to be as successful as they were without any PMs?
Yeah. I mean, I think what was expected from the designer at Snap was not just the ability to design, like, the skill set of designing, which all of them were IC designers, by the way, right? And there were no reports, right? So they weren't allowed to have reports, actually. And so they were designing everything themselves, but they also had to have the leadership skills, right? To go, figure out the roadmap, write all the documents, work with the different teams, figure out shipping schedules, and, just know everything, not just sort of the technical and the engineering part, but, the UX and the UI and the product needs and why are we doing this, the roadmap. There's just a ton to keep in mind. And that means that it was a job that was, just it was very high workload, no doubt, very high workload, right? These people work really hard and they were paid highly too. I mean, for what it's worth, they were paid way higher than you would expect designers or PMs or engineers to be paid, right? With quarterly bonuses and all kinds of things.
That's interesting. And it reminds, people always say, why don't EPMs? There's like someone has to do the work that a PM does. They're not sitting around, doing nothing. And it's important to note the person that will take on the PME work, they have to be good at it and enjoy it. And a lot of designers don't want to be writing docs and organizing stakeholders and getting alignment. And
100%. That's why it was so hard to find those people who were like able to do two things. I actually think there's a insight in, there is innovation between, when you're kind of merging craft, right, between two different functions. And I do think there's something special about one person doing two different functions, or at least being able to do. And I think a lot of like unique insight and innovation can come from that. I actually think so. On sort of my personal side, like I eventually joined the design team. I started at Snap on the engineering team. I eventually joined the design team, over the last 2 years that I was at Snap. And a big part of what I did there was create this function called design engineering. And that was actually a different combination, right? It wasn't the designer PM, it was the designer engineer, right? The person who can think of the UX, design it, and also build it and launch it. All of those things. And we saw both the ability to take designers and teach them engineering, and take engineers and teach them design as part of that, right? Obviously, the reason that we created that function was very different. It was actually to continue innovating as the company got bigger. One of the problems that we identified was that as the company got bigger and bigger, and there's like 500 engineers, 1,000 engineers, 2,000 engineers, 3,000, right? Suddenly, it just becomes very difficult to do everything. Like everything is a 6-month project or a 1-year project. Every product is a massive investment of like 500 engineers and a lot of time. And so you really have to pick your bets, right? If you get it wrong, if you are innovating and trying to create new products and you spend 500 engineers for a year and it doesn't work, it's a big problem, right? You're going to be in trouble, especially for a company like Snap, where everybody was copying what they're doing. So they had to constantly innovate, create new stuff, and push the bounds, right? I think Evan's philosophy was always like, he didn't fight the things that were getting copied, right? Stories got copied pretty much straight up. A lot of things that Snap created got copied, but he was more the mindset of like, let's expand the pie, do something new, and push the boundaries, right? We'll keep innovating, basically. And so to do that with that scale of a company becomes really hard. And so we had this idea of like, let's create a small team where we can go and pre-test a lot of these ideas, because we had a lot of ideas and we can't go and build all of these things. So the idea was create a small team of these design engineers, people who are able to do the entire sort of product design engineering process in their head and can put together early versions of the product, which we would actually bake into the Snapchat app itself. And we were able to like even test, for example, run a test in Australia, see how it's performing, run a test in just a couple of high schools, see what's, how people behave. And that way we already have data on how this might perform in a real world environment, but we haven't built it to production level, right? It's like, it's a prototype essentially, right? It's how a startup might build something. The same idea of, what we're doing at our company now, right? Build it fast, get it out there, right? Get feedback, understand whether it works or not, and then work with the engineering team to build it at scale. Once we understand the product and the dynamics, then it makes sense to put on 500 engineers for 6 months to build it, right? So that was like a big part of it. I think the nice thing that came out of it that was completely unexpected, but actually kind of transformational for me in a way was, obviously in big organizations, alignment is a big issue, right? How do you get everybody on the same page? And a big part of a PM's job is actually to create alignment, right? And it can be a lot of work because you've got to talk to all these stakeholders and get them on the same page. But one of the insights that we had, which was unique, was as the company gets bigger, you can actually create alignment by causing internal virality. If there's enough people in the company, it actually starts acting like a consumer base might. If you share something interesting with someone, they will share it with somebody else because they think it's interesting. And you can actually create virality inside a company. So one thing that we would do is we would create these prototype products, right? We would just go into an area, redo a bunch of stuff, create these prototype products that didn't exist in Snapchat normally. And then we would just share the build, right? and it would explode. Like it would just go viral inside the company. Like day after day, we would hear from, engineers, then managers, then VPs, then eventually from Evan being like, oh my God, like everyone's talking about this. Why am I the last one to hear about it? Right. And so it would create like instant alignment across the company of like, this is exciting, right? This is something that we want to get behind. And everyone would be asking like, when are we doing this? Like, when is this happening? I see someone's already working on it, right? So it was a great way to do that. And once we really understood that the product actually had good sort of dynamics and we had tested it, it was a great way to sort of get it out in front of everybody and create this idea of like, hey, we're all working on this. This is sort of the future, right?
Today's episode is brought to you by Coda. I personally use Coda every single day to manage my podcast and also to manage my community. It's where I put the questions that I plan to ask every guest that's coming on the podcast. It's where I put my community resources. It's how I manage my workflows. Here's how Coda can help you. Imagine starting a project at work and your vision is clear. You know exactly who's doing what and where to find the data that you need to do your part. In fact, you don't have to waste time searching for anything because everything your team needs, from project trackers and OKRs to documents and spreadsheets, lives in one tab, all in Coda. With Coda's collaborative all-in-one workspace, you get the flexibility of docs, the structure of spreadsheets, the power of applications, and the intelligence of AI, all in one easy-to-organize tab. Like I mentioned earlier, I use Coda every single day, and more than 50,000 teams trust Coda to keep them more aligned and focused. If you're a startup team looking to increase alignment and agility, Coda can help you move from planning to execution in record time. To try it for yourself, go to coda.io/Lenny today and get 6 months free of the team plan for startups. That's coda.io/Lenny to get started for free and get 6 months of the team plan. coda.io/Lenny. Another thread I want to follow up on is prototyping. It feels like that is where a lot of PM work is going, is getting straight to a prototype versus design or versus PRDs. And it feels like that's something that you did and worked super well. Like basically it's a team to prototype ideas that in theory now you can just build really quickly with AI. So I think that's a really interesting, seeing where the future is going and just
100%, right? Like getting things in people's hands, trying it out. Oftentimes, like, unless you truly try it out, like, in design, it can, in theory, look good with like all the perfect conditions, right? But when you actually use it, you realize it's actually not that useful, for example, right? Or when you give it to users. And some of this is like intuition, honestly, right? Like just like anything else, but there's nothing like getting something in the hands of users at the end of the day.
I love how many of these things you brought over to your current company. And I'm trying to think about, one is this idea of just constantly innovating. Feels like that's informed, and tell me what I'm missing, but that feels like that's informed the ship a marketable feature every single week. This idea of getting like design, starting almost with design versus PM a lot of times. I'm curious why you don't even go straight to prototype in those cases. Is it just the tools aren't there yet, or?
I mean, I think our shipping process is fast enough that within a week we can get it out anyways, right? So that way we just get user feedback, which is even better.
Okay. And then the other really interesting thing, I'm trying to visualize like that triangle of a product team, the triad of PM, engineer, design. Feels like you guys at Snap took like the corners, not the corners, the line of that triangle, and like you have design engineers,
Yep.
you have design PMs.
Yep.
I imagine engineers were sort of PME already. They're like very product oriented PMs. Did you have a function called design PMs? Probably not.
I mean, honestly, it's interesting,
engineer PMs,
right?
Engineer PMs.
Yeah. I mean, engineer PMs should be a thing, I feel like or every engineer should strive to understand the product, right?
Yeah. A lot of companies operate that way. Like Stripe, I think they had hundreds of engineers before they hired the first PM, because I think the engineers were doing what they did at Snap, which is do the PM work. So it feels like at your company, you don't operate that way. It feels like you have PMs, engineers, designers. Talk about why you decided not to approach things that way.
I do think PM is a very valuable function, right? I think it may be actually, and maybe I'll get roasted for this, but I think at the end of the day, not hiring PMs at Snap might have been one of those decisions where it actually succeeded despite that. And because like someone needs to do that work, right? If you don't have enough people to do it, then nobody truly owns it. And then it kind of doesn't really happen. Or if it doesn't happen, no one's responsible, which is not the right structure you want in an organization. So I think, though, that being said, there was something unique to be said about what if a designer had the PM mindset, right? It's actually the same idea as what if an engineer had the PM mindset. And then you get, even crazier. What if the PM had a design and engineering mindset? I think all we're talking about is everybody truly understanding all the functions that they're working with, right? Having a fundamental, broad understanding of the functions they're working with. At Captions, we're actually saying, going even one step further than that, right? Why shouldn't the PM understand marketing? I think that's actually the biggest, opportunity for PMs to understand is like, how do we actually find the users who have this problem, right? I think that's a big part of solving the problem. I have a unique take on this in terms of, I actually think PMs should own all the way to marketing in a way. And the reason is that if you think about marketing, it's expanding the surface area of the product, right? It's like search marketing is just placing a button to your product in Google. Facebook ads is just placing a button to your app in Facebook, right? It's almost like you work at Facebook, right? You work at Facebook, you have a button in the app somewhere, you make a specific thing, and people show up. The funnel begins there, right? And you have all the metrics all the way from the beginning, right? All the way from when the user tapped on the button in Facebook. And then they went down all the steps, and then they landed on some onboarding screen, and right, they did the thing, they used the application. That's where the journey begins. And all of that is like, in a way, it's a product. Like, it's the same skill set. Understanding users from that point on is like, I think that's fundamental, right? How do we not do that today? We should be. So that's kind of how we think about stuff, right? But I think the core idea is that every function should understand every other function deeply as much as possible. And maybe even to the level where they can operate in that function. And that just increases the likelihood that all decisions being made in the company at the micro level will be optimized for, all possible, parts of the funnel that different people are essentially looking after, right? So that's something we think about quite a bit.
I completely agree with that take. It's interesting that at Airbnb, Brian was famous for changing the titles of all product managers to product marketing manager.
Yep.
For exactly this point, because he's like,
Makes sense.
You should be doing the marketing. You shouldn't just be building the thing.
Right.
And like, to me, it's always, I've always assumed as a PM, your job is for this thing to grow and to get adopted and be loved. So it's interesting people don't already think of it that way.
I agree.
But obviously it's hard to learn the skills of being awesome at paid growth and SEO and product marketing, messaging, positioning. But I completely agree. That's such an important element of building a product. You're not just building a thing, hope it works, goodbye. So I love that that's how you think about it. And so I guess when you hire PMs, it sounds like you look for marketing instinct and some experience.
100%, right? And at least the ability and instinct to be able to learn it, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share one other thing that I thought as you were talking that I think is really interesting. And it comes up a bunch on this podcast. And this connects back to Ev and what we can learn from his success. So Patrick Collison once tweeted this tweet that's really stuck with me, which is, it was around user research. And the way he described it is user research isn't go do user research that informs what you build, and then you build that. It's instead, you do user research, it informs the mental model you have as a leader, a product builder, of what your customers need and what pains they have. And you adjust that model in your head, and then that's how you decide what to build. And it feels like Ev is very much that. Like, his head was on learning what people need, teens in particular, and it just worked.
Yeah, I think it's very spot on. I would say, though, Snap didn't like user research as a function for the longest time. Like, I think there was one user researcher in the company until, again, 5,000 employees, like post-IPO, basically. But I think the people that were making a lot of the product decisions, and the CEO himself, of course, were very steeped in sort of how the user behaves and how they operate. Like, they understood that. I do think, like, Snap also had a unique way of thinking about how to determine if a product is within scope or out of scope of what their mission was, right? And I think a lot of companies use this type of framework, and we try to as well. But essentially, the idea at the core was that they want to enable like private sharing and in a safe way, right? So if So I think that kind of makes it clear that certain things just are out of scope for Snap. Right? It's actually one of the reasons why Snap wasn't the company to discover, quote, short form video, TikTok style stuff, because it was just against the nature of the company to even try something. It was against the mission of the company. Public sharing means possibly bullying and bad behaviors, right? Which is exactly what Snap was trying to avoid. We don't want those behaviors to develop on the app. So, for example, on Instagram stories, you can share somebody else's stories to your followers, right? I can take your story and share it to my followers. You can't do that on Snap. And there was a discussion about, like, should we do this? No, because it can enable bullying, right? I can essentially, I don't, you're not consenting to your thing being shared to my followers, right? And that's essentially bad, right? So a lot of it was done based on this type of pillar-based thinking of, like, this is our mission, this is what we're trying to do. Does it fit within, or is it outside? If it's outside, we don't do it, no matter what the cost of it is, no matter how exciting it is. So, and even on Spotlight, the big challenge was, like, how do you take something like that and put that inside the Snap mission? So that was something we worked on quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, I think there's tons of stories about earlier versions. I mean, Snap almost had essentially what is TikTok earlier than TikTok existed. And it kind of died out because it didn't align with the mission, essentially, right? But happy to get into it.
Yeah, that'd actually be really interesting, because it's interesting that these things are important. It's important to have these clear values and the mission of the company, and to not focus on things that are outside that. And then you hear these stories of, like, they had TikTok potentially. So yeah, whatever you can share there, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but there was this product called Our Stories, and essentially it was like my story, but it was a public story. And it started off with this idea of campus stories, where you can post to your campus and other people can see it. And that actually started creating a lot of virality, right? Because essentially people would post, there was, like, viral moments truly where people would post stuff like, oh, like, I think two people fell in love on it, or something like that. Like, those types of things, like, really went viral, and it had really good engagement. But at the end of the day, the problem was that we were against, like, algorithmic, essentially, ranking of those types of things. So there was a curation team that was looking through every single one, so that there's no, negative behaviors happening essentially on the app. And that was just not scalable. Even though it had really high engagement and was doing well, it just wasn't feasible to have a person looking at every single thing posted to determine whether it's appropriate or not. And so it kind of ended up dying out, but it looked like what was an early version of TikTok, before it had launched. So I think, in a way, though, it was a good thing, because I think Snap does have a mission, and I think it is solving a problem. I do think, there is a bifurcation of social media at this point. There is what you traditionally think of as, like, social networking, where you share things with your friends. And by the way, like, remember the days where that used to be the way that apps would go viral? You would share things with your friends, and then they would share with their friends, right? And everybody was worried about, like, friend sharing and how do you send to a friend, and, can I text message my friend or whatever, right? That time is over. Virality now happens through a completely different mechanism. It happens through essentially algorithms, right, that are deciding whether your piece of content is worth showing to an arbitrary number of people. And this is the new age of social media, right? It's TikTok, it's YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels and so on. And I think actually it's changing the fundamental nature of how people interact, fundamental nature of how things go viral. And I actually think from a regulatory perspective, we should be thinking these as differently. On one side, you have, something where you're deciding, who sees something. And then on the other side, you have something where the company is deciding, which means that it's kind of semi-curated, right? It's actually the company's voice. And so, yeah, I don't know, like, should Section 230 apply to that? I have no idea, right? Maybe not. Maybe we're thinking about this the wrong way. So should be interesting.
Wow. All right. Well, I'm out of my depth on the legality decisions, so I'm gonna not follow that thread. But I imagine there's something really interesting there. Actually, so you've been talking about this, just like how much things are changing.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to follow that thread. And specifically, you guys are at the cutting edge of what is possible with AI video.
Yes.
It feels like we're approaching, and maybe we're there, this world where you have no idea if it's real or AI. I'm curious, first of all, just how far you think we are from that. And second of all, the implications on the world where you can just generate any video you want.
It's fundamental. At the end of the day, like a time where video, images, audio can't be trusted actually hasn't existed for a while. Like if you think about, I mean, there was a world in the 1800s where there was no video or audio or images, right? And everything was proven by he said, she said for the most part. And it's possible that if everything can be generated and anything can be created and it looks just as real as if it were real and there's no way to tell, then we might actually return to that world, right? Where there's no way to prove anything besides, physical evidence or he said, she said. And I think that's kind of scary, but also possibly opens a bunch of new opportunity for someone to figure out how to solve this problem, right? I think it's going to be a big problem. I do think today we are almost there in terms of like creating absolutely photorealistic video. I mean, the very recent models, the very cutting edge is just about like, it feels like a few centimeters away from achieving it. But I do think to fully get there to the point where it cannot be differentiated at all, it's still a couple of years away. I also think that it is use case driven in a way. Like, I think thinking about captions for a second, like we take a unique view on what type of video we want to focus on. Video generation and text to video generation, if you look at it today, it's all silent video, right? There's no audio. And it's often what you think of as like stock video or B-roll, right? You can like actually make a movie with B-roll, right? And a lot of a movie or a TV show or a social media post or an ad actually is dialogue or monologue. That's actually what it is. It's people talking to each other, to the camera, right? Interacting. That's actually what makes true story. B-roll is sort of like supportive elements, that are showing up to, set the scene or something, like maybe, before the scene opens, you see a few shots of New York City or LA or something, right? And then you jump into the room and, now two people are talking. So our goal is to solve the talking video problem, right? How do we create video where people are delivering dialogue or monologue or, things like that? And that's what we focus on purely. And there actually isn't a lot of work happening in that area today, right? And it's not a solved problem. We're getting there. We're getting closer and closer. But today's models actually bifurcate a little bit. So there's a set of companies today that are able to create these types of what we're talking about as like avatar videos. They're using this technology called neural rendering. It's actually not a technology that's affected by a sort of the transformer and diffusion model revolution or the large model revolution, essentially. This is a technology that exists separately, and it doesn't have anything to do with the AI sort of growth happening right now. It just happens to produce semi-realistic outputs. But it actually kind of stops at some point because it's not clear how it becomes generalizable in every situation, right? You can't, it has to be trained on people individually. So you might ingest a little bit of video of you, and then you can generate you. And so it's a different technology and a different outcome, essentially. And a bunch of companies using this type of model. A bunch of companies are doing general text to video with no audio today. These are large sort of generative models, and they have the capability to do more, but that frontier just hasn't been reached yet. I think there's no doubt in anybody's mind on the research side that it is 100% solvable. It's just like somebody has to go do it, and we haven't gotten there yet. Nobody has had the time to go and do that yet. So that's kind of where we're at, essentially. We're working purely on large generative models for talking videos, right? So that's like our core focus. I do think, though, from a safety perspective, we have a unique framework of how we think about it. So generally, videos divide into two categories, right? So for us, we think on one side of what is like documentation. So this is the type of video that it could be a personal video where you're taking a video with your friends and you're hanging out, you're at a restaurant, right? Like it's documenting what happened, you had fun, whatever it was, it's for your memories, right? And there's like a non-personal version of this, which is like, oh, it's like a reporter like documenting a crime or, something that happened or whatever it is, right? And who was involved, what, where was it? Maybe it was a a natural disaster or something, right? And this is for history, like we want to see what happened, right? And there's actually no benefit to AI generated video in any of this, right? Like actually, all of this is just negative. It's all negative, right? Like if we are generating fake versions of reality to fool people, like there's just nothing good about that, right? And we want to stay away from that essentially, right? We want to design products and build products that make it difficult to use for that particular use case, right? For anything that falls within that. And on the other side, you have what we think of as like storytelling. Now, this could be ads, it could be social media posts, it could be TV, movies, like all of these things are storytelling. They're designed for entertainment, they're designed for fun. And nobody believes, like if you watch a Geico commercial, right? Like you're not thinking that the gecko is real selling insurance somewhere out there, right? Like you know that this is fabricated and it's for entertainment. And same with reality TV even, right? It's called reality TV. It's definitely not reality. And, social media, ads, all this stuff kind of falls in the category. And if we can enable more people to tell stories and entertain other people and get their message out there, like that is pure positive. Like this is where we want to focus. And a lot of our effort in the product and design process goes into how do we design products and build products that specifically make it really hard to use on one side and really easy to use on the other side, right? And that's the real challenge.
That's really helpful. Something that I'm really curious about as you're chatting is ByteDance just released a really amazing model. I was actually just looking at it where you put a photo in, I think, and it just creates a video of this person talking in all these different ways. Where does that fall amongst the buckets you just described?
I think that falls exactly in the area that we're in, right? Which is talking people. And that's what they're going after as well there. So that's actually one of the first examples of a large model that, a larger company has released where it's able to do sort of these dialogue or monologue videos, right? And I mean, you yourself, you've seen it, so I'm not gonna, describe it too much, but as you know, it's like highly expressive, right? Like it doesn't look like an Avatar video, right? It looks like,
that's wild.
And that's because the technology that's used is just fundamentally different. It's just like, this is using a true large diffusion model is what they use. Whereas like most companies that are working on Avatar technology are actually using like, something pretty basic in comparison.
How long has it been since that Will Smith spaghetti video? Just to give us a reference of how fast things are moving.
Oh my God, it's been so fast, right? Like it's
Is that like
amazing.
a year or is it like 2 years?
I think it's probably like about a year and a half, 2 years, right?
Wow. We'll link to that video and then you could tell basically that video is the state of the art of AI video 1 to 2 years ago. And then we'll link to this other Omni something, I forget what it's called, of just showing what it's like today. Jeez Louise. Okay. Final question. And this is around something that I know you have a really interesting insight on, which is that you see marketing using AI video basically is kind of the final frontier of how people will experience AI is marketing, is seeing it in marketing channels. Talk about why you think that's the case and just what that looks like.
It kind of comes back to what we were talking about before, where, the reality is that no matter how interesting, advanced, and amazing a technology is, like, science fiction has become reality. We were talking about this, right? Like what was literally science fiction on TV is real now. And most people still don't even know about it, to be honest, right? Like my parents live in India and they are the only ones in the neighborhood that know about ChatGPT. And they write these like amazing like notes to the community, just like with all these words. And, people are just like, how did you get so good at writing? Right. And they're not telling anybody, but there's still a ton of people who don't even know that these advancements have happened. And so adoption is actually much slower, even for the most exciting things, right? Of course, in tech circles, everybody's talking about it. But the reality is like it takes a while to get out there. And I think for companies that are going to succeed, they're going to have to figure out how to market these products so that they can be the ones to reach, all these people that have the problems that they're now able to solve. And we think about that every day. So on that note, like as a consumer product, we spend a bunch of time and money on marketing our products. And we often use like performance channels and all kinds of things. But about a year ago, we would run AI video in ads and things like that. And we would get all these comments of people being like, oh my God, this is so fake. Like, don't show me this. And around that time, the technology got just about good enough that suddenly those comments stopped happening, right? And suddenly you could,
get performance that was even better than actually recording with a person, because you could just try more things, right? You could just generate 30, 40 possibilities, and one of them would win, and it would win more than the one creative you can get from a person. And more interestingly, when you think about localization, you're going to go do that in every language. Like once you discover winning creative, right, now you have to go localize that in every market and rebuild it from scratch. It's just a ton. And oftentimes it doesn't perform as well because it's been like rethought essentially. But we found that just translating it with AI was able to get performance almost as good as the original in the original language, right? So this is going to flood the entire market, right? I think wherever there's dollars to be made, saved, right? Like it's inevitable, right? It will be consumed, and it will very quickly be a lot of social media. I mean, you could imagine a social network of the future where, and this is dystopian, by the way, so watch out. You could imagine a social network of the future where all content is generated. None of the people are real. The algorithm isn't tailoring whose content to show you, but it's purely generating content that, is completely catered to you, right? With people and everything completely catered to you. I don't think it's out of the question. It almost seems inevitable in a way, but that's not too far away. I think that's actually very possibly real in 5 years or something like that.
What I'm imagining, because it's hard to imagine like a social network where it's people, because you usually want to know who these people are. Like, I don't care, randoms sharing status updates, but I can see a TikTok that is all AI generated.
Exactly.
Wow, just like content tuned to your loves and interests.
Exactly.
And just random videos. Wow.
Yep. Because do you know, like you see a TikTok feed, like you don't even know who's real or not today, right? It's not
right. That's how I would approach it. I would just join TikTok and start uploading videos that are AI generated.
Exactly.
And then build a whole network of that. Oh my God, the future is wild. Let's go to Failure Corner. Something that I try to do with this podcast is share moments where things didn't go well. There's all these stories of everything's going great all the time. Oh, this founder, he's killing it, building $1 billion company. Oh, so awesome. But they don't know all the things that go wrong. So let me ask you, is there a story you can share of when things didn't work out, when you failed?
At the beginning of the company, we actually had a bunch of time where we spent figuring out what we wanted to do. And I think it's like kind of a unconventional story almost in a way, because we started off the company. The first thing we did was build the captions app, right? Like we launched the app. That was the first thing we did. Took 2 days to build. We put it out there and it immediately took off, right? It was absolutely shocking because I built it on a weekend. We put it out there. I called my co-founder on Monday and like, it's at the top of the app store. We're getting like 600 videos a day.
Top of the app store.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And we didn't do anything to enable that. It just kind of happened on its own. It was almost anticlimactic in a way because, we thought it would be a lot more time spent figuring out the product before that would happen. And so it felt like, wait, this can't be it, right? It can't be this fast, right? How did this happen, right? So we got distracted because of that, because we were like, oh, okay, well, maybe, this is cool. It'll kind of work. That's great. But, we got to figure out what the product is, right? And so we spent at least like a year and a half thinking about building social networks and all kinds of things when we should have been working on captions, right? Because there was product market fit there. And how we figured that out is captions was sitting on my personal account. So I wasn't checking that a lot. And about a year and a half into the company, as we're working on other projects and stuff, I went back to my personal account, just opened it, and I saw that there was like $500,000 in there. And I looked at a chart and it was just like growing. The revenue was just growing completely on its own. No employees, no releases, no bug fixes, no customer support. There was like 2,000 open support tickets that were unanswered for a year and a half. And great reviews, it's just going completely on its own. And so that was like a clear sign to me. It was like, oh my God, you should have been working on that, right? Like that product works. And so we immediately had a meeting. It was tough to kind of figure out what the right path was at that point because we had invested so much time in other things as well, but reset and we kind of, got back on the track with captions. And literally, as soon as we started releasing the first features into it, it blew up. Like what looked like a vertical line at that time became a horizontal line. And the new vertical line was so vertical that the old vertical line became a horizontal line, essentially. And that's kind of, it's continued since then, which is crazy. So we basically wasted about a year and a half.
I love that new way of thinking about a hockey stick moment where not only is it going vertical, but the rest of the chart is now just flat along the bottom of the axis.
Exactly. Yeah.
For people that may not know what captions is, I'll try to describe it at the beginning and we'll link to it and stuff. But basically, like the reason you thought it was nothing is it just adds captions to a video that you
It
record.
does.
Automatic captions.
Exactly. Yep. So I think, we wanted, like, our thought was like, we're going to build a social network, but first we got to build a creation tool for the social network, right? And we knew that we wanted to use AI to create video. And it seemed obvious that, speech to text, a solved problem, we should start with that, right? So that's why we decided to start with, captions, because it was a solved problem at the time. What was funny is that once GPT and stuff started coming out, like a lot of the things that were unsolved became solved very quickly, right? So timing was almost perfect.
And that aligns to something you shared earlier. Just so many of these problems that were not yet solved are now possible. And the companies that are in the right place at the right time benefit greatly. I've been just waiting for this part. The other thing that I think is interesting about that story is you tried to build a social network. I think it was around like high schools and things like that. As we've seen, it's very difficult to build a new social network. So let me just get your sense. Do you think it's possible for somebody to come around and build the next Facebook, the next Snap, the next whatever?
I think it's definitely possible. I do think, let me tell you something kind of crazy, actually. The social network that we had at the time, we actually removed it from the App Store, so it's not available anymore. But till today, there are thousands of people that are using it, posting on it, and all the different things, which actually kind of speaks to like, the power of the social network in a way, right? It is hard to create and hard to kill. I mean, I think X is actually a great example of that too, right? A lot of movement kind of happened there, and it continues to, work, I guess, somehow. So, testament to that.
The power of network effects, especially. Someone once described this so well. They're like Twitter/X. They changed the brand. They changed the team building it. They changed the URL. Like everything changed about it, except the network effect of the people in it.
It's true.
And now
it's true.
I just saw a story that they're like making billions of dollars. Like he's actually turned it around. It's actually becoming a really profitable company.
Wow.
Yeah, it just came out the other day. So Elon did it. Well, with that, we've reached our very exciting lightning round. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
What are 2 or 3 books that you have recommended most to other people?
I have to say here that I actually don't read books. It's actually something that I decided on purpose, where I decided I don't want to build my skill in reading, and I want to build it in listening and watching instead, because I think that's the future.
I love how intentional that is, and I love how it's like a really cool way of saying I don't read books. The future isn't reading. But I love that you have books behind you. So at least
I do, yeah. The ones that I didn't read, they're back there.
Yeah. That's funny. Okay, cool. I want to ask more questions, but I'm going to keep going. Lightning round. Do you have a favorite, speaking of watching and listening, do you have a favorite recent movie or TV show you've really enjoyed?
I like Silo and Severance. I mean, obviously, I think everyone's watching these. There's a book around Silo too.
I read that. I read all of them. There's 3 of them.
There
It sucks to watch the show because all the tricks that are about to happen. And I'm just like, why am I watching this? I know where it's all going.
I mean, for what it's worth, it does seem like the show is going on a slightly different path.
It is. Really. That was also what annoyed me. And just like, what the heck? This is made up. All this made up shit. I don't like that when I watch a show. So 2 reasons I'm not watching it.
Yeah.
But
don't worry, by the way. I didn't actually read the book. My wife read the book, and then she told me the story.
Okay. I won't. I was worried. Okay, cool. Yeah, and Severance. Okay, great. I love Severance. Next question. Do you have a favorite product you've recently discovered that you really like?
My favorite product, honestly, is Linear. I'm not going to lie. Just because it's so well designed and it's so easy to use. I also like Superhuman. I mean, these are obvious answers, but I do use these things every day. And, it's hard to create products that you use every day and don't hate. So props to them.
Cool. I I haven't announced this on the podcast yet, but this is a good time. Whoever's listening right now, is I just launched a bundle where if you become a paid subscriber to my newsletter, you get, listen to this, a year free of Linear and Superhuman and Notion and Granola, which is an incredible AI app for note taking, and Perplexity Pro.
Ooh, nice.
$2,000 in value for the price of my newsletter, $200.
Damn,
Link to that.
that's real value.
It's an unbelievable deal, and it's a no-brainer at this point to buy a subscription. But this isn't an ad for my newsletter. I'll keep going. Next question. Do you have a favorite life motto that you often find yourself coming back to, sharing with friends or in family, in work or in life?
I actually learned this because someone else told me that I keep repeating this thing, but I have this sort of framework of how I want to operate at work, basically, right? I think I love to compete and to win at the end of the day. And I think that to win, you have to be the best. But I also think the easiest way to be the best is to be the first. And that actually is key.
And so is the motto, the easiest way, is that the
That's it.
Okay,
The easiest way to be the best is to be
be the
first.
first. Interesting. Okay. I have to resist following threads here because I want to make this lightning round. Okay, final question, just for fun. What's like the coolest, most wild AI video you've seen recently? Is there one that comes to mind of like, oh, wow, that was something?
I mean, honestly, I got to say the omni-human stuff was pretty cool.
The ByteDance video that we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the broccoli talking, I don't know if you saw that one. There
No,
was like
it's-
a little broccoli, like kind of delivering a little speech.
Oh,
Yeah, it looked like it was animated by like an animator, you know?
just imagine being a kid these days and just seeing stuff like that.
I think you're probably just used to it, right? You're just like, this is just normal.
It's just like we were saying, AGI is just going to come around. And we're just,
Exactly.
all right, cool. What's for dinner? Yeah, cool. That's great.
Yep.
Amazing. Gaurav, this was incredible. It was so insightful on so many levels. 2 final questions. Where can folks find you and what you're building if they want to learn more? And then how can listeners be useful to you?
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, definitely find me on LinkedIn. That's where I live most of the time. My DMs are open, et cetera, et cetera. So feel free to send me a message. And I think what will be useful, I mean, we're building out our early product and design team. So if AI video is interesting, if consumer apps are interesting, now's the time to join. We're really small, early. We work together across the team. So there's going to be no better time to join, basically.
And you get to ship a marketable feature every week.
Exactly. I mean, that's a PM's dream. Think about it, right?
The PM stream. Yeah. Like, yeah. I like that that's a filter. Like
Yeah.
the people that get excited about that, great fit. The people that are stressed out by that, not the place to be.
Exactly.
So awesome. All right, Gaurav, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.